Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein here in the Yeshiva Shalmaila. And this week, and it's actually going to be a few weeks, we're going to be speaking about hechsheirim, both here in America, and we're going to also do a little bit about Eretz Yisrael. Over there, it's a very politically charged hechsher issue, so we'll be speaking about both. And for the fruma consumer, the Orthodox consumer, costs are substantially higher. A pound of chicken could be double. There's big money to be made in hechsheirim. We're going to have an interview with somebody who used one of the major international hechsher programs to bottle water, and he said his hechsher for water was almost $200,000 a year. And when there's money, there's obviously going to be people who come into it not necessarily l'shem shamayim, but for monetary reasons. Are there good hechsheirim? Are there bad hechsheirim? What is the quality of the hechsher that you're using? If you go to a hospital, you rate the hospitals. The number one hospital in New York City is Columbia Presbyterian Cornell. The hospitals are rated annually. So Columbia is the number one hospital, Columbia Cornell. You'll have Maimonides as number 29, and then you have Jamaica Hospital. And the further you go down the list, the odds of leaving the hospital are somewhat less. So in everything, who's a good doctor? Who's a bad doctor? Are these good shoes? What are your better pair of shoes and your less good pair of shoes? Your less comfortable pair of shoes? Who's the better cook? Who's the worse? Everything. What are the better hechsheirim? What are the hechsheirim that are somewhat compromised? That's some of the questions that we're going to... Do you know there are over 1,000 hechsheirim in the world? Well, are there better ones and worse? And how would you know? We will also be discussing Chassidisher hechsheirim vis-a-vis the great institutional hechsheirim. Can they do what the big organizations do? You're going to see we're going to have somebody on a little bit later. We're going to start going through some of the ingredients that they have in these items that you literally have to have a master's in chemical engineering to understand them. Hechsheirim is not like, do not try this at home. Like the 12 different ways to make maltodextrin. Do you really know it? Do you know what they're made out of? So China, we're going to be speaking about China. It's a Kashrus nightmare. Hear the words of the experts, and we're going to actually be speaking to the largest hechsher in China. We will ask them some questions, and then you decide, would you eat a China hechsher? I would like to say that we called up 17 different Kashrus professionals to do this show, and almost all of them refused to answer the following question, which is, which hechsher would you not eat? So it's like the blue wall of silence that the police had. And they always said, well, we can't talk, we don't want to get sued, et cetera, et cetera. So we really have to do a lot of digging. And additionally, I need your help. So if you had a story with a hechsher and you want to share it, email us or call it into us. We will, of course, keep it 100% anonymous if you wish. In fact, if you want to be interviewed, we can do it using the voice-changing technique that we have where it's not identifiable. We can do that to keep your anonymity. But we would like to hear from you, the consumer. So these are some of the questions we're going to be discussing over the next few weeks. This week we have Rabbi Elefant, who's besides saying the biggest daf yomi in the world, he's also the COO and head of Kashrus for the world's largest Kashrus organization, the OU. We will have from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabbi Auerbach, who is the NPGS. He's also a Hamachshir for other organizations. We will have Rabbi Yisroel Halberstam from the SKS, Shutz. We're going to be trying to figure out, how do you know if something is a good hechsher? What are the questions you should be asking? And then we'll be speaking about some of the questions. Who can be a mashgiach? What level of Yiras Shamayim does he have to have? Halacha knowledge. Can a woman be a mashgiach? Can you give a hechsher to a place that is, the person is not a shomer Torah mitzvahs, or he's not mibnei amenu? A nichnas v'yotze, how often? Is there a difference if it's a factory or a restaurant? What's the halachic precedence of nichnas v'yotze for a company that's overseas? Violation of a hechsher. How often does it happen? Is the hechsher automatically revoked? Transparency. What will they answer when you call up all these different organizations? These are some of the questions that we're going to be speaking about. Let me give you a little bit of the halacha background, okay? It's really a Gemara. It's a Shulchan Aruch and Siman Kuf Yutes a Machalos Asuris, and there's 2 days in the Shulchan Aruch. This is one of the some 20 odd places in the Shulchan Aruch where the Mechaba paskins, like the Beis Yosef paskins, like the Balei Taisvis, and the Ramah is more machmeri paskins like the Rambam, whereas the Beis Yosef doesn't paskin like the Rambam. Basically, the Mechaba says that to be a mashkiach, even if it's somebody, if you don't know if he's a kosher or not, you're allowed to. And the Ramah brings from the Rambam, no, for somebody to be a mashkiach, he has to be huchzik bekashrus. The Shach on the spot says, of course, for shchita or for a butcher shop, you need a higher level. Over there, you do need somebody who's muchzik bekashrus. But neither one, even the Rambam, the Ramah, who's machmir, says you need somebody muchzik bekashrus, does not mention the concept of a mashkiach. And that is later on. It's the Beis Hill, in the Shulchan Aruch, you have the great Beis Hill. He's the one, and the Lechem Aponim on the Shulchan Aruch brings that the Takonis Vad HaRatzis was even for somebody who's Huchzik B'Kashrus to have a Mashkiach, but this is not in the Shulchan Aruch, so it's somewhat arbitrary. It seems that Takonis Vad HaRatzis was not in a skabel all over the world. But, Rav Sternbruch brings it in the Chuvas Van Haggis, he brings it, and he says, even if the person's a Roy V'Neman, you should still have a mashkiach because einodem royachai v'atzmai. People could cut corners, etc. But this is somewhat arbitrary. But the great, we're going to hear from the OU. They have no restaurant that does not have a mashkiach tmidi. We're going to hear from the Chaf K that they're going to say that no, if the person's a shomer Torah mitzvahs, they need a mashkiach 51% of the time. We're going to go through. We'll put online. Where was the first hechsher? Everybody listening knows the first hechsher was Chaysamay Shel Kohen Gadol on the Pach Shel Shemen. But where were the first commercial hechsheirim? We're going to trace them back to the time of the Noda B'Yehuda. So this is the halachic background of it, and then we're going to go to our guests. But before we go to our guests and this really fascinating program, here's a 1-minute clip from a store owner in Lakewood. We have on the phone with us a store owner from Lakewood who uses the KCL hashgacha in a milchiga setting. There's no meat sold there. Who I would like to ask a few questions. Welcome. How are you?
Shalom Aleichem.
Question for you. How often do the KCL mashgichim show up at your store?
I would say it's very sporadic. It could be once a month. It could be once every 4 months, 6 months. Not very often.
Now, if you wanted to fool them, could you?
Absolutely. They show up very sporadically. I can sell Fleishika products. I can get products from anywhere. They're not there for the shipments. And they show up usually on scheduled appointments less than once a month.
So if you wanted to, let's say, substitute, tray for cheese for Chalav Yisroel cheese, you could do that?
Yes.
Do they trust you because you're a Kol Yungaman and you're a Shemayim? Do you know if that was part of their equation?
Yeah. Before they started giving a hechsher, they sat down, asked many questions. They checked into me as a person. And I think that most of the hechsher, what they're giving on, is on the person more than when product comes in or the day-to-day operations.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Before
we go to our guests, I do want to ask 2 riddles, our riddles of the week. It says, V'hadoga asher b'yoir mesa, Reb Avin Balevi, right, that the Yidden got rich off the dam. How was it? Ketzad, HaMitzri v'Yisroel b'bayis echad, v'hagigis malei mayim. The Mitzri would take out of his dam, the Yid would take out of his water, he would sell it once, he would sell him a thing, once he paid for it, it remained water. And what happened? Yidden were nisasher, they became wealthy from selling the water to the Goyim. So the question is, the Sifsei Tzaddik asks the question. He says, the Gemara in Tainis, Chavdalad Amar Aleph says, that Rebbe Lezer gave everything he had, all his money, to marry off a Yasam and a Yisaiva. He gave his whole warehouse, he was emptied, stuff that he should have used to marry off his own kids. what happened? With the last dinner he had, he went out and he bought a pound of wheat and he put it in his silo that was totally emptied out. He woke up in the morning, a nest happened, and the entire silo, from the roof to the floor, was jam-packed with wheat. So the Gemara says, Rebbe Lezer was Mesarev to be Mahana from the Tfuah. He didn't want to be Neneh from Maisa Nisim. And what does Rashi say? Asal la'adam lahana is be Maisa Nisim. And if you do that, Menakin Mischu Yosef, they take away Zchu Yosef. You're not supposed to be Neneh from Maisa Nisim. So the question is, if you're not supposed to be Neneh from Maisa Nisim, how could the Gemara and Rashi say over here that they were Nisasher off the dam? That is our first riddle. One more riddle, and we will, of course, at the end of the program announce our riddle winners this week. It's Nachum Parnas and Yossi Miller. We'll have it at the end of the program. Here's another one. What does it say? It says, Rashi says, the pasuk says, Yud Beis Vav, v'noslem shtei mitzvahs, I'm reading Rashi, dam Pesach v'dam Mila, u'molu ba'oisei halayla. They were mal the Laila that they ate the carbon Pesach. Shenemer mispoiseses b'domayich, both dam and Pesach and Mila. So Rashi holds that the Mila was by night. And it's also a Medrash Rabbah. Rashi's quoting a Medrash. It's a Pella. It says, beferish in the pasuk, kol oral lo yoichal bay, and the Gemara in Yevamis Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph says in oral, shemish haya oral b'shas shchitas haPesach. When does it count? When is it considered? When is the settlement date for Mila? Not the evening, but the Gemara in oral says, the Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph says that it has to be b'shas shchitas haPesach. How could Rashi say that the Mila was Balayla and they ate from the carbon Pesach Balayla when the Zman Mila has to be B'Shas Shchitas HaPesach, Mamish Pella? In general, the whole fact that they were mal themselves by night is Pella, because the Shulchan Aruch in Yeridei Reish Samach Beis Sef Aleph says that Zman Mila is B'Yom Dafka. And even Mila Shalei B'Zman Asur Balayla. So V'chalei Rashi, how could they make the Mila Balayla? For these two reasons. Those are our two riddles. Let's go to our wonderful guests. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Harav Moshe Elefant. He's in charge of all OU Kashrus. That means so much of what you eat and your family eats is his achrayus, his response. He oversees it all. He also gives the largest daf yomi shir in the world. And a few days ago was Rabbi Shapiro's Yartzai Tzachar Levracha. Over 1,800 people listen daily, which is pretty incredible. I think it's larger than Rabbi Shariel Shir. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Dov Schwartzman of the Mir Yeshiva. Welcome, Rav Elefant.
Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Lichtenstein. Nice to speak to you again.
So, Rav Elefant, hechsheirim in general, to most consumers, absent the Chassidisher, right, which has its own issues. We had on, Chassidisher Shchita. And we had, one mashgiach tell us that, let's say, to be a chassidisher shchita, your wife can't drive and you can't be a Zionist. Or in Skvera, to be a chassidisher shchita, it's that you don't have one of the chaf aleph chumris that, it's not about bedikas tzaimes hagidin, but it's about, does your husband wear boots? And other such serious kashrus issues that make chassidisher shchita. So my question is about hechsheirim. There are many people who are real Yirei Shemayim, and, they all wear one cloak, star K, chaf K, OK, UK, and there's the OU. So, for the most part, there's been the wall of, the blue silence, when a cop does something illegal, I think it's called the blue veil, the blue silence, they never report on each other. There's to a certain extent been about hechsheirim. Look, we're all under the veil of hechsheirim, and we don't say, but there has to be a difference. I mean, the OU is a not-for-profit organization, for starters. Many of these other organizations are for-profit organizations. Well, people do things for profit that a not-for-profit wouldn't do because they're motivated by the holy dollar, right? So my question is, as a consumer, how do we get a read? What is a good hechsher? What's an A hechsher? What's an A minus hechsher? What's a B hechsher? And what's a C hechsher? How do we get some visibility into what is a very opaque and shielded sort of environment?
It's a fantastic question. In a way, I'm obviously a good person to ask the question because I've been living in the world of Kashrus for 31 years. In a way, I obviously come partial to the OU. But I'll tell you what I think are some basic rules one should look for in making that determination. What you just mentioned, that a hashgacha is not a private enterprise, is obviously a crucial point. And I'll just expand on it. You said it very well, but I'll just expand on it for a moment. For all of us at the OU, Rabbi Genak and myself and everyone else who works at the OU, we are salaried employees. We are not owners of the OU. Our salary is not tied in any way to how many hashgachas we give or drop. Our salaries are fixed, and they're not fixed by us. They're actually fixed by a board of outsiders who are overseeing our activities. So we don't have any financial incentive to give hashgacha because we're going to end up with the same where we start, so why would we want to do something wrong? And that's critical. It also means that if we feel that a hashgacha should be dropped, or we feel that a hashgacha should have more visitation, and all of these things have financial considerations, we are able to do that. The second point, which I think is very, very important.
Can I interrupt you? And I just want to be a Yehuda Weidlekra that the Mechaber Paskins, and I don't have a Hilchos Eidus in front of me, Hilchos Dayanim, but at some place in the Chesed Mishpat, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet in that zip code, that a Dayan who takes money to Paskin is puzzle, right? In other words, what does that mean? Or an aid, for that matter. In the United States, it's very common. They bring a stooge and they say, listen, you're the cell next to him. You're supposed to get 7 years. If you say he said this and this and that, you could say that. We'll reduce you to 1 year. And the guy will say anything to get out early.
Right. So I want to. You're right. And since you interrupted me, I'll interrupt myself.
Okay.
Just last week, I was at a company. And I usually don't go out that much to factories. I'm mostly in the office. But I was at a company owned by a frum younger man, a Ben Torah, who learned in yeshiva. So that always is a challenging conversation for us in the Kashrus world because they consider themselves sometimes bigger Talmid Chacham than us. And this individual tells me, and I felt after seeing his establishment, that he needs a mashgiach tamidi. He needs a full-time mashgiach there. And he tells me, well, Eid Echad Nam B'Yisurin. He went to yeshiva. He knows that you could trust in Eid Echad. I said to this individual, you are 100% right. And if you invited me to your home for dinner, and you're a frum guy, and you tell me everything here is kosher, I'll be dinner. I should eat here. Eid Echad Nam B'Yisurin. But that is not something to be taken into consideration when you speak about a factory and you speak about a business. Then the halachas Eid Echad Nam B'Yisurim fall away because there's so many considerations. So I'm just completely agreeing with you that when people have financial considerations, all sorts of normal behavior change.
In other words, it's not Isurim anymore. It becomes Mominus, and by Mominus, you meet up Ishnei Yedim, Yakum Davar.
It's a pure halacha. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
So that's number one.
So my point is you have all these private organizations. You have a private organization. I'm sure many of them make millions of dollars a year. And what happens? And they could lose a big account because this account wants to do a certain kula, or because this account doesn't want a mashgiach visiting so many times. So they're sitting by themselves to say, the account is $100,000 a year. Maybe it's, we found a Chuvas Rashbash or a Marsheshach that we could be Saimach on. Who would? To me, that's very problematic.
It's a huge achrayus, and even where I don't have equity in the OU, I don't sleep every night well because of it. Certainly in that situation. The next factor to take into consideration, I'm only going to say 4 factors, although probably there are many more, is the transparency of the hashgacha. If you have a hashgacha And again, it makes no difference to me who is the Rav Hamachshir and from what group of Klal Yisrael he comes from. If he isn't able, if he's not transparent, then when you call him about the hashgacha, he isn't willing to share with you the details of the hashgacha, who, and whatever questions are asked, from who is the mashgiach to, Bishlakim and Pas Yisroel and whatever else the caller is interested in hearing. If they're not completely transparent, that is a huge issue. Just saying, I give the hashgacha and trust me, you're a very fine person, you're a very great Talmid Chacham, nobody's questioning that, but a strong hashgacha needs to be totally transparent. Third point is, who is the staff of the hashgacha? Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael is blessed today with a tremendous amount of B'nai Torah, Talmidei Chachamim that learned in many yeshivas. And Kashrus at the beginning and end of the day is certainly a halachic matter. And even if the individuals who are working in the hashgacha are not necessarily able to paskin every difficult shayla, for that you need Gedolei Yisrael, you need to have a group of B'nai Torah, and not just B'nai Torah, but you need to have a group of Yirei Shamayim. And that's something that the consumer should be asking and investigating. Who are the Rabbanim involved in the hashgacha? I could be proud of the OU when you come up to our office. I'm not even talking about the hundreds of mashgichim we have outside of the office, but you come up to our office, we have 55 Rabbanim in our office. Every one of them is a Ben Torah. Every one of them learned in yeshivas. Every one of them is a musmach. Every one of them is a real Yirei Shamayim. And that's critical. And I'm not saying it's only at the OU. And lastly is the ability of a hashgacha to say no. If you have a hashgacha that every time they get an application for supervision, somehow or another, that hashgacha happens, that means that's a hashgacha that is not reliable. It really goes back to what you said. That means that their financial considerations are what really are driving their decisions. A hashgacha has to be able to say, we can't do this because of this halacha, because of this concern, because of this policy. Yes, we started the conversation with marijuana. If the OU agreed to certify recreational marijuana, we would have at least 10 more companies tomorrow, lucrative accounts. But we do what's right. We don't just do what's profitable.
Okay, so let me ask the obvious follow-up question. Which are the profit and not-for-profit hashgachas? I'm not so...
I'm not going there.
Okay.
I only could speak about the OU.
Okay, wait. So which ones are transparent? Which ones have transparency of hashgacha? Your second point.
Transparency. Again, transparency of hashgacha is not something that I'm able to speak about.
Okay.
I'll make the following comment because I'm really not comfortable speaking about other hashgachas. Everybody should speak for themselves, and I would like to speak for us, not have others define me. Having said that, certainly it goes back when you have usually in many communities you have a Vad HaRabbanim. So when you have a hashgacha that's run by a local Vad HaRabbanim who are just there to service their local community, that's usually going to be a transparent, non-profitable environment. So
as a consumer, let me ask you the next step. So who are the transparent hashgachas? Can we know? I mean, how would I know that?
Many of the OU is certainly very transparent. I know that the CRC from Chicago is quite transparent. And again, I really, you see, the level of transparency that I get.
What about like something like the OK?
I mean, I think they're fairly transparent.
Well, the Chaf K.
The Chaf K is transparent.
So let me continue. The staff, you said, as the staff Yirei Shamayim, are there hashgachas out there that have staff that are not Yirei Shamayim?
Absolutely, unfortunately.
And who are they?
Oh, no. You're going to visit me in jail?
Okay. So let me ask you the last question.
For libel?
The ability to say no. Who doesn't say no?
There are many hashgachas that don't say no.
And who are they?
I'm not going to mention names.
So here's the problem, Rabbi Elefant.
So I want to tell you. I'm going to first tell you.
Let me finish my question. So here is my question. I and this show will have 50,000 listeners, right? who listen to it are going to be scratching their head, and they're going to be saying, well, we just found out. We know that there's a difference of hashgachas. There are those that are for profit. They're not for profit. There are those that are which most people, I guess if you spend time on the internet, you can figure it out. There are those that are transparent and those that aren't. There's no way a consumer like me would know that. The staff, you said there are many that aren't Yerei Shamayim. I would never know that. That's getting into the weeds. The ability to say no, clearly we would never know. So what do we do if everybody if all doctors are the best doctor, right? Because we don't have the Shuki Bermans of the world, you don't have you wouldn't have like the best doctors, whatever the case may be. But if every doctor is the best doctor, and every Rebbe is the best Rebbe, and every boy is the best Bacher in Lakewood, and nobody wants to spill the beans, so isn't a big avla being done to the consumers of our?
You gave the answer to the question. You made my life easy now. You just gave the answer to the question. Because what happens if chas v'sholom you need a doctor and you want to go to a good doctor? What do? What happens when your daughter is read a shidduch and you really want to find out who is the bacher? What do? We all know that there are methods of doing investigation. So I'm going to respond to you very sharply. The issues that I raised are not the hardest questions to get an answer to. Believe me, getting honest information on a shidduch is harder than getting the answer to the questions I gave you. And I don't have children, but I'm telling to you anyway. And you know what I said is true.
So, Rabbi Elefant, your knowledge...
So let me make my point.
Yeah.
What I mean is it requires one thing. It requires the consumer to take the time and the effort, or frankly, and now I'm going to make a very controversial statement, or frankly, have their rabbonim, which I know some rabbonim do that, to take the time and the effort for their communities to do that kind of investigation. So when somebody in their shul comes over to them and says, I want to run a really erlich kosher home, do you know which of the hashgachas I could trust or not? And just get the answers to the question.
No, but Rabbi Elefant, I agree with you. Let me ask you, how many major hashgachas are there?
Major hashgachas? 4 or 5.
And how many next? Less major, medium size.
Medium size, at least 100.
So my question to you would be is, Baruch Hashem, yes, I have a daughter who goes out, and when a boys thing, I'll make. But if it was about calling about 100 boys or 1,000 boys, I mean, giving up my learning, giving up my day job. Now we have 50,000 listeners. I think it's sort of difficult for a lot of people to say, here's the top 100 hashgachas or 200 hashgachas. Grab a pen and start making calls.
So I respect that, but on the other hand, you understand that I'm not that I can't answer that question because you're calling a competitor. If somebody's going to call your competitor, you're not the place they're going to necessarily call.
But I'll tell you why you would be believed, Rabbi Elefant, because since it's a not-for-profit, and I think that the OU sees itself almost as a steward for Klal Yisrael through the OU, NCSY, all the money goes to Kiruv. You see yourself pushed as a Eved L'Avdei Hashem. So, yes, if one of the for-profits said, I would say, geez, it's another account they're trying to grab. But you do say no. You see yourself as a public. You're sort of like the community school. That's why I would ask you. I would not ask many of the other people.
So the answer to it is, if somebody would ask us, and many people do on a private basis, there are ways that we answer. But we're not able to answer publicly because it's just not it's very dangerous. And when we do, and every time we've tried to do it, we've regretted doing it.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. Is there any society website that has done this work for the tzibur at large to say who are?
I think that the CRC from Chicago has a different approach, and they do have a list. It's probably not exhaustive, but they do have a list. Rabbi Fishbein seems to be a very good friend of mine, and I think that he does post on their website some of the hashgachas or many of the hashgachas that they've investigated.
Okay, that's wonderful. But let me just, as a follow-up, you would agree that there are many hechsheirim that you would not eat?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And as a Ben Torah, you would say...
I just had a conversation with one of the rabbanim who works for us today, who told me he just went to inspection at a place that has hashgacha that actually we get a lot of calls about. and they use all sorts of vegetables that require serious bedikas talayim, and he came there, and there's absolutely no system of checking the vegetables.
Right. So let me ask you, when does the OU require a nichnas v'yaitza, and when do they require a mashgiach tamidi?
We require a mashgiach tamidi in every restaurant and every caterer. Let me define mashgiach tamidi, because again, when you're speaking about hashgacha, the word mashgiach tamidi seems not to be as simply defined as you would imagine. The definition in the OU, at the OU, of mashgiach tamidi is, as the words say, full-time hashgacha. The mashgiach is the one who has the keys to the kitchen. The mashgiach opens, the mashgiach closes. Nothing happens without him. And that's every restaurant, whether it's fleischiks or milichiks, whether it's owned by a Jew or not owned by a Jew, whether it's large or small, everywhere. And the same obviously goes for caterers. Anywhere that meat is being used, we have a mashgiach tamidi. Anywhere where they're producing milichiks and fleischiks on the same kalim, and we can't, or certainly kosher or non-kosher, I'm talking about factories now, obviously, and it's not easily self-verifiable that there's no issue, we require hashgacha tamidus. Everywhere else, we rely on yotzei v'nichnas. Yotzei v'nichnas means spot checks, unannounced. All of our spot checks are unannounced. The frequency of the visitation is determined by the Rabbanim in our office. A more complicated factory, in the definition of complicated, means that they have ingredients that are sensitive in the eyes of Kashrus, have more frequent visitation. If a company is doing something simpler, we have less frequent visitation.
Could you try to give us an example to us Amaratim lay people, what that means, ingredients? Give it. A would be require and B wouldn't. Give us an example. Okay,
so we'll do perhaps extremes. A factory that's bottling water, okay? Or a factory that's manufacturing soap will have very infrequent visitation.
I didn't know. I'm sorry to say, I didn't know soap needs a hechsher. Would you ever see a KCLwith soap?
Well, there's a whole concept of sicha k'shtia.
I understand
I'm not going to tell you
the shartziyah in Hilchos Shabbos, a chumrah. That's why they. Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm not telling you it requires hashgacha.
Okay.
You asked me a question, I'm answering it. So that type of factory will require less frequent visitation. A factory, for example, to go to the other extreme, that's manufacturing flavors. Now, almost everything we eat has flavors in them, and flavors are very, very complex. A flavor, you look at a bottle of soda in front of you, and it says cherry flavor. Well, that cherry flavor could be comprised of hundreds of ingredients. Most of them, you can't even pronounce the word, and some of them are sensitive in the eyes of Kashrus. And you could walk into that factory, and you have literally an inventory of thousands of ingredients. You need a top-notch mashgiach to be there often to make sure that they're all kosher. So even if they're not there full time, they're going to be there very often.
So I have a question for you. You have hechsheirim that are giving smaller hechsheirim that are giving hechsheirim on flavors. Do they have the expertise? I mean, it's like you have thousands.
Now you're really touching on a much more complex issue. Most of the small hashgachas are not giving hashgachas to these kind of factories. They're relying on us. So your average small hashgacha is nowhere close, and wouldn't even probably, if they're Erlich, wouldn't undertake the supervision of such complicated factories. But they're not certifying those factories. The bakery that they're certifying in their local community that is using flavors, the flavors that they're using are coming from a factory that's all certified.
So let me ask you, if somebody buys, let's say, Be'er Mayim Chaim soda, which is full of flavors, are they being samech on your certification for the flavor, or they have their own experts?
They're being samech nas.
Let me ask you a follow-up question.
They'll call us. Yeah.
Follow-up.
Oh.
All these hechsheirim, which many of them are smaller, I imagine, when you have one of the smaller hechsheirim that's being saimach on OU, so a chain is as strong as its weakest link. What's the use of having a hamish name on there when really it's the OU that they're standing on? They might as well just be saimach on the OU from beginning to end.
So, again, I'm not necessarily the right person to ask the question because I agree with you that they could comfortably rely on the OU. What the consumer who's relying on that hashgacha is essentially relying on is that the Rav or the agency that they're relying on knows who they should rely on and knows to ask the right questions, something we spoke about earlier, of that hashgacha that they're relying on, to make the determination, yes, that's a hashgacha that we want to rely on. No, this is the hashgacha we don't want to rely on.
But in effect,
that's
they are
really really what they're relying on.
In effect, they're really relying on the OU at the end of the day. I mean, and their Rav doesn't have the expertise to ask which of these 1,000 ingredients is going into the flavor anyway. So it's sort of Now let me ask you a rabbit hole question. Why don't you have cameras? You have Nichnas V'Yotza. It's a modern age. A camera is not expensive. Why don't you insist upon cameras? And in effect, you have.
We actually do. We have required that all OU food service accounts have cameras that we have access to 24 hours a day.
Wow. So today, in effect, the Mashgiach Nichnas V'Yotza almost has the same.
We've required that,
and
I have to tell you, not only have we required that, but it goes back a couple of months. Before the summer, you might have heard, your listeners might have heard, that there was a situation that came up in South Africa where there was a serious Kashrus situation, and the local Bezdin in Johannesburg asked Rabbi Genack and Rabbi Fishbein and myself to spend a week in South Africa. And one of our first recommendations to them as well was that you should insist that there be cameras in all your food service establishments. Okay,
now, so a follow-up question. You deal with, for the most part, real serious industrial enterprises. How often are you fooled? As the Mashgiach comes and he says, they hoodwinked us. How often do you say, wow, the Hashgacha really... that Mashiach Tmidi or the Nichnas V'Yotza is really necessary because they were pulling stuff in through the back door, sort of like the famous the tabach from Muncie,
Right. Most of the, I can't say never. I wish I could say never. I can't, and I certainly hope and daven that we have the siyata d'shmaya that this isn't happening to us. If there's somebody chas v'shalom, and not that this isn't a serious issue, but if there's somebody really out to cheat us, and that's what he is planning on doing, it could be hard to catch them. We've learned over experience that even those individuals ultimately get caught. Saif gan flotlia. But some of them are good, and it's complicated, and that goes back to what we spoke about earlier, why you should be careful whom you give hashgacha to. But what we see more often is not people who are deliberately doing something wrong. They're deliberately trying to cheat. Because if you don't want a hashgacha, just don't take one. What they're trying to do is, Kashrus is complicated, and these big companies are doing a lot of things that are not necessarily run by B'nai Torah, by people who know about Kashrus, and inadvertently they can make a mistake. And that happens much more often than the person who deliberately is trying to cheat. And that's why you need the mashgichim and the cameras.
But have you had situations where larger industrial enterprises have indeed cheated?
Again, what does cheated mean?
On purpose.
Deliberately?
Yes.
No, not that often. Not that often.
When you say not that often, it's 1%, 1 in 1,000. Just try to give us an understanding of what that means.
No, certainly not. 1 in 1,000 is a much closer number, or 1 in a couple of thousand.
Okay.
Would even be a better number.
I've been asked this question by a bunch of listeners. How does Coke get a hechsher when nobody knows its secret ingredients?
I could tell you the following. Again, not only are we sworn to secrecy about Coke and confidentiality, but we even sworn that we're not allowed to tell people anything we know about Coke. But I could assure you and anyone listening and anyone not listening that the OU knows every ingredient that goes into Coke and could tell you the kashrus of every ingredient going into Coke. Not only for all year round, but the OUP product as well.
Okay. So, by the way, I believe that we are going to speak to Rabbi Fishbane, and we're going to try to get a bunch of mashgichim because I think it's a public service. If you have, the top-tier players that are doing a real wonderful job.
Rabbi Lichtenstein, I completely agree.
Yeah.
The best consumer is the educated consumer.
Yeah.
And if you could help us educate the consumers, kol hakavod.
Okay, so let's because I'm a big chassid, by the way, of the OU. I know a lot of the mashgichim, and I know you and Rabbi Genak, and I'll tell you how I tell my bnei bayis, I tell my wife how I would use the hechsher. I said if I would lend a person money on a handshake, I would eat the hechsher. Rabbi Genak and yourself, these are the people you would lend money to.
Okay, it's good to know.
Yeah. Okay, another question. The hechsheirim in Eretz Yisrael. So I'll tell you a humorous story that happened to me. I was staying at the one of the Fruma hotels in Eretz Yisrael, and I have a friend from yeshiva from years ago, and I invited him to come over. And I said, bring your wife. I was by his chasana. He was, he came to my wedding in America, so he came. And I said, why don't you have a bite? Let's have, I called over to bring some zionist. And he was about to, and his wife gave him a look like he almost jumped. He said, no, I'm not hungry, anything, no zionist. I said, okay. I said, I know the mashgiach. I've spoken to him many times. He's a very erlich fellow. And he said, okay, then. And his wife gave him like a kick under the table. No, I don't even want water. I said, listen, I'm telling you, I know the mashgiach. I asked the guy, wait, could you ask the Mashiach to come? This guy comes with and I'd spoken to him many times. I said, he learned in Panovich. You're talking about, he said, oh, so his wife started looking all embarrassed. And I said, he learned in Torah. I said, you learned by Shmuel Rozovsky? I said, where'd you learn before Panovich? So the guy gives me like a shake of the head, don't ask the question. So I said, okay. I said, but what could be so bad? He blurts out. He says, "I learned before Panovich. I learned in Kfar Chabad." Oh. So his wife gives aha, and she pushed the glass of water away with us, saying the water, because he went to she's obviously a Litvisher. She was so the water became treif. The thing, and I just looked at her. I said, "This is such a olam hasheker with the hechsheirim here. If these are the things that it's totally in." So, do you know anything about the politics or what goes on in the hechsheirim in Eretz Yisrael?
Unfortunately, I do. And the story that you tell is unfortunately not something that surprises me. I very often say this. When you, your wife, or whomever goes shopping in America, whether you go to a supermarket or you go to a restaurant or wherever you're going, you're not, as we've discussed, you're not necessarily accepting every hashgacha, but your decision is based on a halachic consideration. Do I feel that this is a hashgacha I can rely on? Do I feel this is a hashgacha I can't rely on? When someone goes to the supermarket in Yisrael to buy a product, it's like going to the elections. The decision is a political one. Well, I'm affiliated or feel comfortable with this group, but I don't feel comfortable with that group. And even if that group is a great hashgacha, but I'm not politically affiliated with them, and I can't eat their products. So it's very complicated when your decisions are like an election and you're making a decision who you're going to vote for when you buy a bottle of milk.
So how do we decide? Is it Reuben? Is it Sam Sefer? Is it Rabbanut Yerushalayim? Is it Rabbanut Mahadran? How do we know? I'm not into the politics there. I honestly don't know the parties there. How do we know what is a good?
It's a very serious question. It's a very serious question, and I want to give you some background to why. Before we can come to an answer, I think we need to develop the question. There's two very important issues in making the determination in Eretz Yisrael that don't really play a role in America. The first consideration, which is a very large consideration, is the Rabbanut consideration. The OU is not obligated to give anyone a hashgacha, and no one is obligated to receive the OU hashgacha or any hashgacha in America. So if you have a company that chooses to be certified, it's because they chose to be certified, and the one who's certifying them chose to agree to certify them under the conditions that they insist on. In Eretz Yisrael, the local rabbanuts, I'm not talking about the Mahadrin, but the local rabbanuts are obligated to give hashgacha, and the local establishments are obligated to receive hashgacha. So it changes the dynamics considerably. If the company has to get hashgacha, even though they may not be interested in it, you could understand what kind of attitude they come in with, and what's the chance of them following the rules. And the rabbanut who
wait, but I don't understand that. What does that mean? They're obligated. No, you could
every
pray for
company
food.
has to be certified.
Well, you could. But there are tray for restaurants in Eretz Yisrael. Are they inside?
Right. So, well, those aren't so simple. For example, if a restaurant came to the OU and said, you know what, we'll be completely kosher. We'll use everything you say, but we'll be open Shabbos. We wouldn't give them hashgacha, obviously. And at Yisrael, that's a real issue.
No, but there are many restaurants that serve pork. I mean, they're not.
Right. So that they've chosen not to be certified, and that's not so simple that it's legal. Just many local municipalities choose to turn the other eye. In Bnei Barak, they wouldn't remain open because the local municipality would not let them stay open. Then the Rabbanut has somebody coming to them, and if hashgacha came to us, as we've discussed in this program, we would give them our conditions. And they would say, well, rabbis, we're not ready to have a mashgiach tamidi. It's an expense that we're not ready to bear. So we say, okay, so we're not going to certify you. It's not that simple for a local rabbanut to give that kind of an answer to a local establishment. They have to find a way to give the hashgacha.
So you're saying the rabbanut is fighting with one arm tied behind its back, that it has to give hashgacha, it does not have a choice, and
right.
Therefore you end up with suspect people because they don't have the power or the ability to say no.
Right.
Now, are there rabbanuts that like you said, Rabbanut Mahadran? Are there?
So that's regular Rabbanut.
Okay.
Now, some cities, some communities have Rabbanut Mahadran. Rabbanut Mahadran is a different creature. They're not you're not obligated to give Rabbanut Mahadran. Their obligation is similar to the OU's obligation, where you're not obligated to be Rabbanut Mahadran certified, and the Rabbanut Mahadran is not obligated to give you hashgacha. So that makes it a lot easier for the Rabbanut Mahadran to say, well, these are our conditions. And if you want to follow them, great. And if you don't want to follow them, then don't follow them, and we won't give you hashgacha. So it's certainly a better standard, but it's also all the issues that we've discussed in this program still remain very alive. Who is the Rav? Who are his mashgichim? What are his standards? Are the same questions in Eretz Yisrael as they are in America. And sometimes those questions are harder to answer in Eretz Yisrael than in America, and I'll explain to you why. First of all, you're dealing with Jews. So it's much harder to tell the person who you daven with in shul and you live in the same community that I don't think you should get I don't think you're worthy of a Rabbanut Mahadran. We're not giving hashgacha to people that we typically associate with socially or in any other setting, or that we're their Rabbanim. Secondly, there's an interrelationship between the different Rabbanuts around the country. And it's very hard for one Rabbanut not to accept the ingredients and products of another Rabbanut. And that puts pressure on these different Rabbanuts to accept products that are not necessarily of the best standard. So that's the Rabbanut Mahadran issue.
So a Rabbanut Mahadran has to take hashgacha of a Rabbanut non-Mahadran?
Legally not, but sometimes there are other considerations that push them there.
So how would we know which are the Rabbanut Mahadrans that are good or which are not good? Is there somebody
the exact same way you mentioned earlier in the program, you would know how the hashgachas in America are good or not. It's the exact same question. It's the exact same question.
Okay, now let's go past Rabbanut. When do you feel less worried about slander and talking about all there's, I don't even know the names.
I'm not going to mention names,
okay.
But I think that exact same rules that I've been mentioning and considerations that I've been mentioning in this program for what I define as reliable hashgacha here in the United States applies in Eretz Yisrael. So if it's a large hashgacha, if it's not a private enterprise, if the people who are running it are Erlich Tamidei Chachamim Yirei Shemayim, those are the exact same considerations that you should use in Eretz Yisrael. And Baruch Hashem, and I travel to Eretz Yisrael, and I have a lot of connection to particularly the hashgachas in Eretz Yisrael. I could tell you there's some very reliable hashgachas in Eretz Yisrael who are doing a great job.
Would you say that the OU standards are as high as any of the hechsheirim in Eretz Yisrael? Do you take a back seat to any of them?
We certainly don't take so I want to be careful in answering that. We certainly don't take a back seat in standards, and we certainly don't take a back seat in operations. I fact, and again, I recognize that I'm partial, believe that our operations, our methods of operations, the OU has a computer system which is second to none. We've invested millions and millions of dollars. Every factory, we know every ingredient is registered. If tomorrow morning I get a notification about a certain ingredient that is no longer certified or there's a shiloh on, I could just press one button and tell you which OU factory is using it and notify them, and all of that will be done in less than 5 minutes. I have a computer system that has information, a database of information of the Kashrus status of literally millions of ingredients available at a press of a button. You tell me the name of an ingredient, you tell me the name of the manufacturer, and I'll probably be able to tell you, is it kosher, is it parav, is it milchigs, who certifies it, and will the OU accept it? So we're certainly very, very far ahead in operations. But there are nafkaminas and halacha, and I want to be clear about that. The OU is not makbid on Chol Yisrael. Most of these hashgachas that you're referring to in Eretz Yisrael are makbid on Chol Yisrael. The OU is not makbid on Pas Yisrael. They're makbid on Pas Yisrael. The OU is not makbid on Chodesh. They're makbid on Chodesh. So, I don't know what you mean by standards. I'm being transparent, as I've tried to be always, and tell you what we're makbid on and what we're not makbid on, but systems, I certainly think we're the best.
So if it's not an issue of Chadash or Chalav Yisrael, right? You say that, or Pas Yisrael, you say that the Kashrus standards of the OU, or none of that, the Kashrus efficiency and quality of the OU stands up to any hechsher in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay. What about, let's say,
I believe, but I may be naive, that even our detractors would agree to that.
So when somebody says they only eat Reuben or this and that, basically you're saying, listen, I don't care how fancy of a name you have. If you eat OU, you're eating as good or better quality, assuming,
Absolutely.
Again, it's not possible.
I know Rabbi Reuben very well. Rabbi Reuben actually works for the OU. Rabbi Reuben is a very good friend of mine, a close friend of mine, and his hashgacha is a very good hashgacha, and he's a big Talmud Chacham. But I'm certainly as comfortable with the OU standards anytime as I am with systems as I would be with Rabbi Reuben's.
Now, Empire Chicken is under the OU, is that correct?
Yes.
Would you say that the Empire Chicken is as good as any chicken in Eretz Yisrael, Kashrus-wise?
The answer to that question is absolutely yes, but the way shechita is conducted in America and the way shechita is conducted in Eretz Yisrael is a totally different operation. So in America, for example, the way shechita is done is that the workers hold the chicken, and all the sheichet does is just shech the chicken. In Eretz Yisrael, the sheichet holds the chicken when he shechs it. So it's a different style of shechita. But in terms of reliability, and even more importantly, in terms of the quality of the sheichtim, absolutely. The Empire Chicken, probably in my opinion, is superior. Empire is a shechita which is l'shem u'sferes.
So if somebody is spending a fortune on Rav Bronsdorfer's private shechita and this one and that, basically you could say, listen, you may feel better, but you're not getting a better, from a kashrus level, you're not getting a better product than you're getting from Empire.
I certainly believe so. And even, I certainly believe so, Empire product, I mean, it's not only Empire. You asked about Empire, but I am incredibly proud of every OU Shechita. I'm quite involved with the OU Shechita operations, and every piece of OU meat or poultry is something I'm very comfortable with.
Rabbi Elefant, it's as always an honor and an education having you on.
Thank you. This feeling is mutual, and you should be able to help us do the avodas hakodesh of educating the tzibur.
We're going to do that.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Koltov. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night. We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabbi Weisner, who's been running the KCL, which I guess stands for the Kashrus Council of Lakewood, for the last 30 years. He's a Talmud of Rav Paula. He's a Talmud of Panashvish. He's a Talmud, obviously, of Beis Medrash Gavoya. He's a Musmach of Rabbi Cheskel, of official Hershkowitz, and Lahavdel ben Achaim and Achaim, Rabbi Cheskel Roth. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Moshe.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Moshe, I spoke to 3 or 4 different stores, owners in Lakewood, and they talk about the affordability of the KCL, which I think is very interesting. There was an article somebody sent me this week in New York that 15 restaurants in New York have closed over the last year, and they interviewed a few of the owners, and one of the owners basically said the hechsheirim added the cost to every burger between $1 and $2. So given the relative, the aniyas of the city of Lakewood and the fact that so many of them are B'nai Torah, the constituents, and they live, look, I lived there for many years. You have people that live mamish b'dalei dalas. Is affordability for you a big component of the hechsher and being? One store owner said you charged him $300 a month. The person who was interviewed in the paper said his hechsher was $60,000 a month. $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month. So is making it affordable so that it doesn't add excessive cost to the families of Lakewood, is that a consideration of yours?
Most definitely. I think that we try to be, minimal charge just to keep the organization functional. We have to pay mashgichim, of course. We have 3, besides myself, we have 3 mashgichim going around town every day, and, they have to get paid.
So this is not a profit center where at the end of the year there's a big bottom line and it's supporting lots of families and it's buying, vacation homes, or alternatively...
No, chas v'shalom.
And alternatively, other ones like the OU, they run NCSY off their kasher. They run a tremendous amount of other chesed organizations. Yours is stripped down, and it's basically about providing kashrus and making sure it's affordable to the people. Absolutely.
We really run a very frugal budget over here. My office is in my house. I don't even, we don't even...
There's no fancy cars and secretaries and stationery.
No, not at all. Okay. Everything's homemade. Of course, I have to have a car in order to go around to places that I need to, but nothing fancy at all.
Rabbi Weisner, here's a question. We had on Rabbi from the Chezky, Rabbi Ari Center, and he said their standard is, he said, if you're running a restaurant, we require a mashgiach 51% of the time if it's a erlich yid and 100% of the time if it's a guy. The OU is 100% of the time. Now, the people we've spoken to said that you can come once a week if it's a fleishiger restaurant. If it's a milchiger store, it could be once a month. Is it fair to say that you are soimach a lot on the ehrlichkeit of the people? In other words, I had on somebody from Lakewood, and he said, listen, if you could have 6 mashgichim there full time, if the owner's not erlich, he's going to find a way to get 79 cents a pound chickens in somehow instead of $1.79 chickens. Are you soimach on the fact that you know the pedigree of the people, when they learned in yeshiva, which yeshivas they were, when they go to minyan? Does that come into your equation?
Absolutely. we do not give hashgacha to someone who is not shemitayra mitzvahs. We recently had a request from someone who is planning on opening up 3 establishments in Lakewood, but one of the shutfim who was running the establishment was not Shemesh Shabbos, and we didn't accept it. We couldn't accept it because we have to have...
somebody's not a shemitayra mitzvah. Now, let me ask you something. How would you define shemitayra mitzvahs?
We go by the definition of the Aruch HaShulchan. It's someone who davens normally, someone who's like a normal yid. He davens normally, he wears tzitzis, of course Shemesh Shabbos, keeps Kashrus. Has to be a regular, normal yid.
So you're referring obviously to the Aruch HaShulchan and Kuf Yud Tes, I think it's a Cotton Ches.
Absolutely,
so
right, exactly.
To somebody who's not, what about an Eina Yehudi? Would you give a hechsher to them?
No, it's against our policy. Like I said, we wouldn't even give hashgacha to a yid who's not shemitayra mitzvahs.
Kal v'chayim to a guy.
Kal v'chayim is someone who's not a yid, and it's not really. It shouldn't be misconstrued as a matter of discrimination. It's pashut because in order for us to be able to give the hashgacha, we need someone who's conscious of kashrus, and that's only someone who practices kashrus. Someone who practices Shabbos, someone who practices Shmiras Torah mitzvahs. If we don't have that kind of a person, so you'll never be conscious. It won't, Kashrus is not something that bothers him, so it's very hard to give someone like that hashgacha. We wouldn't even do it with a mashgiach tmidi. And we had that already. We had a case in Lakewood where there was someone who was, we had more than one case, but I'm just thinking of a certain case that there was someone who was really not a shemitayra mitzvahs, totally not. He was willing to have a mashgiach tmidi that he wouldn't even have a key to the store, but we refused the hechsher.
So how often do you go? Let's say somebody has a hechsher in their house or in a store. Give us a little bit of guidelines.
Someone who has a hechsher in the...
Let's say somebody's producing in their house. Give us, you say, like for a store it's one thing, for a house it's milchiks, fleishiks. Give us some of the guidelines as to how often you would have a mashgiach come over based upon the different parameters.
I'll tell you what it is. Really, we judge every establishment on its merit. We could have one store that will go. We do have 3 mashgiachim going around town that go to all our stores, and they're going around every day of the week. Not every store every day. Sometimes we feel a place needs more hashgacha for whatever reason. Sometimes the balabas is, the owner is not as compliant as should be, or sometimes the owner doesn't know. He seems not to know what to do. He doesn't seem to know what we want. There we have to go more often. Sometimes there are people who are very good. They know all the rules. They keep all the rules. And we see after a while, after it starts off, we see it's going very good. So then we cut down on the visits.
But is it fair to say that there are places you would go into once a month, or if it's in somebody's house, it could be as rarely as once a year?
No, it wouldn't be as rarely as once a year. Even in houses, we try to get someone in, at least once every, it's hard to say. But if we're dealing with, Elcha people in the house where there are no goyim working, and it's only Yidden, and it's a Yiddish balabasta who we see knows the rules and keeps the rules and calls us with questions, I'd rather we can cut down to, a few times, let's say 6 times a year. It all depends on the situation.
I had a lady who told me she baked in her house, and she said that the mashgiach came as infrequently as once a year. And I'll tell you what my hargasha was. Is that this lady, if the Chafetz Chaim came to Lakewood, he would eat in her house without asking any questions. Mm-hmm. I mean, are these some of the things that you take into account?
we definitely take into account, like I said, we take into account, how we see it, what kind of person it is and how conscious they are. And if they're in communication with us the whole time, they have a lot of questions. So we know that they care, or they email us. So, we go less, but it's not these days. We don't go to anyone once a year. I'm much more makbid on that.
Rabbi Weisner, the Shulchan Aruch does not require a mashgiach. Even according to the most stringent opinion, which is the Shittas Rambam, if the person is a muhsik bekashrus. So it's Yodua that there's a lachem aponim brings from that there's a takanas dalad arotzis.
Right.
Everybody should have a mashgiach. When you have hechsheirim in the house that you go every 2 or 3 months, let's say, now you upgraded it. This lady told me it was once a year. Are you basically saying, look, the Shulchan Aruch does not require it, so it's a combination? She said you checked every ingredient, you told her what she could do, how she could do it, what ingredients. So my feeling was you were being saimach on the most stringent day in the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Rambam. The lechem aponim, the vadar barotzis was not niskabel in the Shulchan Aruch, even the Aruch HaShulchan doesn't bring it as halacha. So you basically, are you being saimach on the nemanis of the people, and the hechshir is just sort of, look, we consult, we tell you what to do, how to do it, what to do, and now you have to tell us you're doing that? Or do you feel that the Yaitz of a Nichtas with a Geder of Mirsis? How would you define your hechshir?
I would say that we're doing both. The main thing is that you understand yourself that you have to be saimach on an owner. Like I said, we only give hashgacha to people that are Shem Torah mitzvahs. A lady who's in the house and there are no goyim there working, and like I said, she's communicating with us.
And her husband
and
is in Kol, and there's a ton of Yerushalayim in the house.
Right. So then there's really not much for me to worry about. But nevertheless, I've rather we upgraded and we go more often these days. Baruch Hashem, it's not an easy thing to do, but to go to houses because, ladies have families and you can't always, come in. It's not like a store that you could just walk in whenever you want. So the mashgiach has to, adjust his schedule and his time to, to the way the family is running.
And I'm curious, how do you deal with issues of yichud when it's a lady in her house?
So that's really one of the problems that could come up. Sometimes we have 2 people go. There are certain cases, which isn't so often. And sometimes the mashgiach will try to go at night when the husband is home, and then there's no problem.
But is it fair then to say, Rabbi Weisner, that a hashgacha like that, there's very little chance of mirsis if you need that much warming, and therefore it's really about the nemanis of the balabayas when you do
absolutely
like that? Yeah.
It's about the nemanis of the balabayas, and we're checking up on them that they're keeping all our products that we require and all the rules.
Rabbi Weisner, one of the store owners we spoke to said you're makbid, you like to use the Chassidisher hechsheirim, like Liebers, and I think that was the one he mentioned. Is that correct?
It is correct. We like to use Chassidisher hechsheirim, but we certainly use national hechsheirim also. I would like to explain that there is a maila in the good Chassidisher hechsheirim. The maila is that it's a double-checked situation. It's 2 mailas, really. Number one, a Chassidisher hechsher will double-check everything going on by the national hechsher thing. So I have a double guarantee. And the second maila is that Chassidisher hechsheirim b'derech klal make special runs where they send the mashgiach down to the plant for the run. Like Liebers, if they're going to make a run in an OU plant, so they're going to send down somebody to the production.
You're saying the Chassidisher hechsheirim are basically an add-on. They use the OU and an extra person. They're not doing their own runs. Is that correct?
That is basically the good hechsheirim. I don't know if it's every single product that way, and I don't know if it's necessary every single time that way, but b'derech klal, that's the way they do it. And that's giving me an extra layer of protection, which why not have it if it's there?
Now, who when you have shilas, like who's your bezdin?
Rabbi Forsheimer, it used to be, we used to have Rabbi Gabriel Finkel, also, but right now it's Rabbi Forsheimer, Rabbi Chaim Lieberman.
So,
he's my
Rabbi Weisner, I have a political question to ask you.
Uh-oh.
Being a mashgiach basically means being a traffic cop in a way, a ruchniistic traffic cop, right?
A ruchniistic traffic
cop, yeah. I mean, you're
okay.
the inspector, right? You're the
correct,
right? Is it like do you end up in uncomfortable situations? Like you're cops give out tickets. That's what they're there for, right? I mean, the Moshe says in the Gather of Nichtas V'Yotzes, he says there has to be mirsis lamaisa. So even though you're being saimach and you're not saying I'm not being saimach on mirsis, I'm using the anashim, but there has to be an element. Do you end up in uncomfortable situations?
Sometimes we have people that will, by mistake or they think it's good, it's not a mistake. Sometimes a distributor will send the wrong product. So the Balabas is not really the Mazid. The Balabas didn't realize. He orders from the Hamish distributor, and the Hamish distributor, instead of sending him this product, send him the other product. So that's one case. And the other case is sometimes a Balabas says, what's wrong with this product? Why shouldn't I use it? It's fine. It's nothing. It's no big deal. We just, for example, someone will just take in a certain strawberry jam. What's wrong with strawberries? He's going to think. So he just takes it in. And he doesn't really mean anything bad. So then we have to take care of that. That's what we're there for. We try to help the owners of the stores by getting them products from National Hechsheirim which cost less whenever possible. We have someone special for that checks a product for us from the National Hechsheirim, and we very often use them. Very often we have to come on to that, of course. Sometimes they need it for taste, sometimes they need it for price.
Weisner, we had on this fellow who was interviewed in the paper. He said she says it cost him $5,000 a month for a 750-foot store that made burgers. And I don't want to tie you to a number, but if I came to you and I said, I'm opening up a store at 750 feet in Lakewood, I learned in the yeshiva, whatever, I pass the Ehrlichkeit, where my kids go to yeshiva, you learned with me, maybe you learned with me b'chavrusa, whatever, I want to open. Give me a range of what the KCL would charge vis-a-vis the National Hechsheirim. They say it's going to cost you $5,000 a month. And if I came to you, give me just a ballpark what it would be. How much of affordability does it make a difference?
Of course, we reckon that sometimes we give a break when someone starts a business. We give them a break.
But give me between what and what?
I would say between 2 and 4. 2 and 400. Yeah.
Not 1,000, 100.
No, 100. No way.
100.
No way. No.
Okay.
Nothing close to it.
Rabbi Weisner, is there anything you would like to add on that maybe I didn't ask?
There are many. I would like to say that the people in Lakewood, it's a very Choshevet tzibur that we have over here. And, they, how do you say it in English? They fodderin,
they demand.
They demand. They want something with a better standard. Not always could you give the highest, most chumradik standard, because that would make it impossible for people to exist. But they want something with a pretty high standard. So that's why we're makbid to get the best hechsheirim possible, wherever possible. And if not possible, even if we have to use national hechsheirim, we have someone check them out. Our rule goes that they national hechsheirim that come from all kosher plants, all kosher parv plants, we will allow. Even the ingredients in those products are taken into consideration by our mumcha. We have a very big mumcha who checks things for us. I don't know, I'm not going to say his name, but he's well known. And there has to, we try to help people out with that. But nevertheless, we want to keep a very good standard for the Olam. There are many different things that balabatim of stores, even if they're ehrlich, they don't know. They don't know rules of Bishul Yisroel. They don't know rules of fleishiks, milchiks, and parv. They don't know rules of Hilchas Challah. They don't know rules of checking eggs. Avada, the hardest part of hechsheirim, which is Hilchas Teiloim, we have to set certain guidelines that we can help out the stores with, but that they should do it right. There are many, many reasons that, many, many pratim to take care of in hechsheirim, and, a lot of times it costs money, special extra for mashgichim. In addition to that, there are Shabbos caterings, there are hotel caterings where you need good mashgichim for hotels, especially treifa hotels, Shabbos jobs in kosher shuls don't need such a great, such a high level of supervision. There's not much going on, but in hotels you certainly do need it. So there's a lot of things that the Vada Kashrus has to take care of. There's a lot of work. People don't know what goes into it, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we hope that we have siyata d'shmaya, the Eibishter helps us, that we serve the tzibur in the right way and do, what's good b'einei Elokim v'adam.
So the KCL has done something very unique. It's made hechsheirim of a very good type, of wonderful, affordable, which is something that is, I interviewed somebody this week. He said he ran a water company, and he said he was with the OU, and his bill was over $200,000 a year. He said it was a big part of him not being able to stay solvent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Lakewood, but here's the question that I was asked by somebody, and I struggle with: how do you prevent another Finkel situation? In other words, if it's a big element of we're dealing with people who, they're Ureim, Shleimim, etc. Finkel was in Monsey. He was the Baltikeya on Rosh Hashanah in the Shul, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was the president of the yeshiva, one of the chashivs of the yeshiva here in Monsey, and he fed Tarfus for 8 years to Monsey because the hechsheirim said, "Oh, he's a neman." And on one hand, the Shulchan Aruch says you can, but on the other hand, how do we prevent something like that from happening again if we, in effect, trust our store owners?
Okay, it's a very good question that you're asking, and let me say two things. Number one is that just because there was one Finkel, and chas v'sholem, the Eibishter, it should never happen again. But that doesn't puzzle everyone up. I'm still going to go to my friend, my neighbor, or any Elachayid here in Lakewood and eat, and I'm not going to think that he's a Finkel. It's not going to, affect. I have a lot of people here, under our hechshir, and there's no reason to think that this, 1 in 100-year thing is going to happen. It doesn't puzzle everyone up. But that's one step that we have to understand.
Rabbi Weisner, one question. I think that I imagine that Finkel himself at home made kosher. In fact, the Gemara says, and the Shulchan Aruch says, that even somebody who's not a neman to sell, you could be mesarach etzlo. He may sell tarfus, but not eat tarfus. So
very possible, yeah.
I'm just not saying that necessarily eating in somebody's house is necessarily the fact that when it comes to money, people do things for money that they wouldn't do at home.
Right.
So, and I just ask you, I applaud what you do, because Lakewood cannot not tell people live on mamish dachi dachkus because you have to live on Torah, and then it costs you. You need to buy something, and it costs you so much more. So I applaud what you do, and I'm just struggling with this question.
Right. So that was number one that I want to tell you, and the other thing is, you can't, just because someone is from an Elech, you can't close your eyes totally. Chas v'sholem, I don't want to say, I'm not trying to say anything about anybody, but you still, if you're going to keep looking, don't forget that in that case, which was very unusual and a real something that mamish kemat happens a few times in the history of Klal Yisrael, which chas v'sholem never happen again. But if the refrigerator is locked and you're not looking for month after month, you're not looking at all, chas v'sholem, such a thing could happen. But if the refrigerators would have not been locked and people would have been looking and looking and looking, someone would have caught on to it much before. And that's what we do. That's why we have to go in. Taka, it's true, we have to go in. Sometimes we have mashgiach tmidi in the butcher shops, kemat always. We have people looking constantly. We don't leave it alone. But you have to keep looking. You have to look in everybody's refrigerator. And you have to have other ways of getting information through distributors, through people that deliver. There's a lot of things that we do to keep on top of the situation.
So
not everything can I say. But
I understand. So you're saying
yourself.
that you feel that you're mekayim kabdeyu v'chashdeyu. On one hand, there's nemanis.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, you do your homework as well.
You have to do your homework. You have to keep your eyes open. And you have to go around and you have to talk with people. And you have to, the mashgichim, one of the jobs of the mashgichim is not just coming in and looking at, you have to talk with them and see where they're holding and see what's going on. You have to get a feeling of it. There's a lot to it, more than can be spoken about.
Rabbi Weisner, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have with us on the phone from Lakewood, New Jersey, Rabbi Chezky Auerbach. He's the Kashrus administrator for the KSA. He's also in charge of the Kashrus for Lakewood's NPGS, the KCLwith supermarket. He's a Talmud of Beis Medrash Gevaya. He's a musmach of Rashiv of Lakewood, Zechayin Levracha, Reb Shnei Kotler. Welcome, Rabbi Auerbach.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Rabbi Auerbach, I'm going to use an analogy. When a person goes to the doctor, they find out where he went to yeshiva, where he went to school, how good he is, which hospital, who had a good experience. They're putting their hands in their life or their health in somebody's hands. When it comes to Kashrus, which it's, our ruchniistic neshama is to a certain extent totally in Kashrus, right? It's metamtem es halev. We get a stamp. It's some type of an emblem with letters in it and either a circle or not a circle or a box and a triangle. And the consumer in America or internationally has absolutely no idea. Is this a doctor who was looking at? Is this the guy who was, before the tests was going through the data, or was actually memorizing? He had the cheat sheet. We know nothing, and we take something that it's an avish and a neshama pluyaba. It's one of the two things that the Rambam puts in Hilchos Kedusha, in the Sefer Kedusha, and we know nothing. It's a black box. How, as a consumer, do we know, is it a good hechsher? Is it a bad hechsher? Do they pay their mashgichim so that they get top mashgichim? Are they makber on your shamayim? Do they pay for the extra plane fare, cab fare to do the due diligence? How do we know? It's like, I would never go to a doctor with the information I have when I bite into a Danish. What are we supposed to do? Give us some advice.
This happens to be an excellent question. It's an extremely pressing question, and it's the drum that I've been beating for many, many years, where I have spoken in public frequently in shuls, for which I'm never invited back, because I tell the people that it is their responsibility to form a Kashrus committee and ask that the Rav teach them what they're supposed to be concerned with, and then they can't obviously storm the office of the Kashrus agencies, but together with the Rav, a committee should meet with them, at least on the phone, meet with the various agencies with a list of informational questions that they and the Rav have formulated and weigh the results and the answers. The clearest sign that somebody is not doing their job is if they will not honestly and with complete transparency address questions that are asked them in honesty. Now, sometimes there are some people who have their life's work set for them where they're looking to entrap others, and they have these cutesy little questions that they ask, and they very cunningly will edit the responses that they will post in public media or other places to show that, look who I entrapped this time. But I'm talking about serious, mature people addressing serious professionals with questions that they have the right to ask. And I think that everybody has that responsibility. And Rabbi, you yourself put it best. Before a person goes to a doctor, have brakes done in their car. They'll do their due diligence. And it is unfortunate that people have neglected this very, very vital part. And for instance, people come along. I've seen advertisements for Pesach programs where there is no hechsher listed. It says in the bottom, Chassidisher shchita, as if this is some sort of a magic potion that is metayr all the shrotzim that they're going to find there, and they don't realize that this is it is a himmelgeshrei that people have exchanged. It doesn't say anywhere in halacha that a person has to eat chassidish or heimish. It says a person has to eat kosher. And just as every person has a responsibility of l'shmartem miyod l'nafshesechem, a person has a greater responsibility, perhaps as you pointed out, that it's an aver shat nefesh tliya by, that a person has a responsibility to be very inquisitive and very aggressive almost in pursuing answers about their kashrus.
So what questions, Rabbi Auerbach, give us a list of a number of questions you say you should be asking. You meaning me and everybody listening.
It's a hard one, but if you had to be put to the wall, for instance, let's break this into two separate parts. If you're going to be talking about, for instance, like food service, which is really negeya in a very real fashion, anybody that eats outside of their home, whether it's at their child's bar mitzvah, at their child's chasana, or at their brother's sheva brachas, whatever it's going to be, if you eat outside your house, you are putting yourself at the mercy of the Hamachshir. If you go to a place and you say, I'd like to speak to the mashgiach, and they say, oh, we don't have a mashgiach, he comes every once in a while, that's a real good reason to turn around and walk out. If there's nobody there who is responsible to the Hamachshir to have answers available and to interface with the public, this shows that there is I wouldn't say it's a depraved indifference to the to the public's well-being, but it shows a callous indifference to the comfort level of the kosher consumer. Every kosher consumer has the right to walk into a place where they're going to be served food, whether it's a cafeteria, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a chasna hall, wherever it is. They have the right to be able to ask respectful, intelligent questions.
So we had on from the Chezky Rabbi Senta, and he said their standard is that if it's not shomer Torah mitzvahs, if the balabas is a shomer Torah mitzvahs on site, a mashgiach there 51% of the time minimum, and if it's not a shomer Torah mitzvahs who's not fully there on site, in other words, it's spray-owned or not. He says then you need 100% mashgiach tzmidid. Would you agree with that standard, or do you think it's overly stringent or not stringent enough, etc.?
Well, full disclosure, I had worked with the Chezky for many, many years, and I still remain closely related to the administration there. I respect them, and I think they do their job well. That being said, I'm not sure whether what you mean or whether the articulation was clear. Even the 49% that Rabbi Center said they do not require an on-site flesh and blood mashgiach, I believe that there's somebody that should be responsible to be able to interface with the public and present responses.
Well, that would be the balabas who's a shomer Torah mitzvahs.
Okay, I hear that, and I understand that is a standard that many people will say is sufficient. I would like to see more than that. You're faced with the reality, and here's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that Kashrus is unfortunately driven by the money, by the exchange of monies. And let me explain what that means. Certain agencies will demand a mashgiach tzmidi, period. They're not going to be mavchen between one type of place and another type of place, a frum owner, a non-frum owner. If this has my name, this has a mashgiach.
Like who is that? Like who, for example, who would require that?
I believe that some of the smaller vadim, and again, out of town vadim. This is a very wavery line in the sand because, for instance, out of town, it is easier for some vadim to make demands across the board simply, first of all, because they're the only show in town, and second of all, because it's a horribly dangerous thing to say, yeah, you're Shem Shabbos, so you don't have to. You're not really Shem Shabbos, you just say you are, so we're going to demand it of you. So some of the out-of-town vadim will require a full-time mishkiach, or at least a mishkiach that's there from substantively from opening to closing. Let's say they might not require mishkiach there during the pot washing overnight or something like that.
So give us a list of 3 questions that a consumer, an ignorant consumer like myself, you think should ask. One is there a mashkiach here on site that I could speak to? What would be number 2?
If the answer to that is no,
you have your answer.
This is a real. If there is if the mashkiach is not here at the present time, and all they're doing is, let's say, just some commissaries do all their prep work in the morning, all the deliveries are made in the morning, everything that's taken care of is taken care of in the morning, and there's a mashkiach. The vegetables are checked, the meats, everything, the meats and fish, and those type of things, or if, let's say, in a pizza shop, the cheese. By the way, the price differential, people think, milk is nothing. The difference in the price differential between non-kosher cheese and Chalav Yisrael cheese is astronomical. So there is certainly as much of a reason to be concerned about milchiks as there is about fleishiks. But if a mishkiach is not in charge of receiving the materials to be able to check out each thing as it comes in, there is nothing. Even if there's a frum balabas, if the frum balabas is so busy, and many of the hashgachas that say, well, the frum balabas will make sure everything's okay, I think miss the point that a frum balabas is very busy being a frum balabas. He's meeting with customers, he's making plans, he's trying to help out clients, all these things. Meanwhile, deliveries come in. By the time the frum balabas, with the best of intentions, catches his breath and goes downstairs to the basement to see what was delivered that day, the product quite probably was already in use. Or it's stuck away somewhere on a shelf that he's not going to have the opportunity to look at each individual item to see what it was. This is particularly cogent, for instance, concerning Yashan. Almost all companies that deliver to frum places will have multiple sources for product. They'll have, for instance, Yashan and non-Yashan of identical products. That means there's a flour called All Trumps that is available. If you buy it far enough in advance, you'll be able to stock up on Yashan and deliver it. I've been to distributors where they have in one alley in their warehouse, they will have on one side of the aisle, they're going to have Yashan All Trumps, and on the other side, they'll have non-Yashan All Trumps. And the foreign national who doesn't speak English doesn't suddenly magically read English when he has an order form in his hand that says Yashan, to make sure that he's taking from the right side of the aisle, not the left side of the aisle. The only way...
You're saying basically, you think a mashkiach tzmidi in every food service, in every restaurant, is an important thing, and if someplace doesn't happen, then there's a chance that something's getting away from you.
Without a question.
What is another thing that you would ask?
Okay. Another thing that they ask, that a person should ask is, for instance, this splits up into so many different things. For instance, vegetables. Do you check your own vegetables? Is there a separate person who checks vegetables? If the answer is no, we wash it off well, that's not. I'm not saying it's not kosher, but it's certainly not something that a person, that a thinking, concerned person should be comfortable with. If they say, no, we only use stuff with the hechshir, you have the right to ask which hechshir. If a person says, like, we use bodek, we use positive, we use kosher taste, fine. At least you know they're dealing with reputable people who have expertise in the field. If you say, I don't know, it has a sticker on it, with the Yiddish ISIS, this is a very dangerous thing.
Now, I have a question to you, Rabbi Auerbach.
Sure.
Sometimes you have a chumrah that maybe we de kula. What do I mean to say is, let's say if you say Chezky says we want 51% the mashgiach, 49% the owners who show Torah mitzvahs, right? Now, Me'ikar Adin, there's no shiloh that they're right, because the Shulchan Aruch, when you have somebody who's muchzik b'kashrus, you don't need more.
Right.
Somebody says, I want to be machmer, I want to have a full-time mashgiach. Well, you know, a full-time mashgiach, I was reading recently a place that closed down. He said the hechsheirim added a cost of $2 to every single burger.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's like we have an oilam that's
Rabbi,
they have huge families. They have big families. They're trying to support kids in kollel. Now they're trying to make a simcha, and they say the simcha is going to cost X. So now your food cost went up by X because we have a chumrah. We want 100% mashgiach. Like, I don't know, is that a chumrah that's a good chumrah or not a good chumrah? That's what I want to know.
Your point is well taken, but let's illuminate by the other way. Let's say you go to a chasna. I'm not talking about it, the kind of chasna that people collected $6,000 so that the kala and the chasna can enjoy the chasna. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a gedichtzecha. I'm not even talking about the other end where somebody's spending $100,000. I've seen chasnas that have cost tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And when you say you need a second mashgiach because there are two kitchens on two separate floors, he says, "Oh, is that feiltig? The mashgiach can't run from what to save $200 to have an extra mashgiach for another 4 hours." This they don't have money for. So I think that we have to be very, very cautious before we assume that Kashrus is such an onerous burden financially that it's beyond or it pushes Kashrus to the edge of the table of discussion. Because a mashgiach can take many, many forms. To have a shtick fleish mitzvah eigen sitting in the corner, you're absolutely right. Then it's irritating. And I'll tell you the truth. When I have mashgichim, I don't insist, but I certainly encourage them to participate in the workflow in order, first of all, because a mashgiach who participates in the workflow has a much better feel for what's going on. And he knows what's in each pot, knows what's going on in the kitchen. And he also has a certain a voice of authority that I'm part of this workflow. I'm telling you that here's a problem, here's a good, this is right, this is wrong. So, first of all, oftentimes a mashgiach would carry his own weight financially for the cost of the mashgiach. That's first of all. And even if you're talking about a mashgiach who's not involved in physically involved in engaged in work, there is still not that much. Now, I thought you were going in another direction with the question of David. I thought you were going to say that it is a chumrah mevel de kula, that since the expense is so egregious, to push down the cost of it, they'll hire non-professionals. And anybody that's out of work, I once told somebody that if the U.S. Department of Labor knew of this trick, instead of gathering all these different variables to try to figure out the health of the labor market, they would simply contact the kashrus agencies and ask them how many people have applied for jobs as mashgichim this week. Because there's a direct correlationship. As the economy dips, you suddenly have an influx of people who say, listen, I'm out of work anyways, I might as well go be a mashgiach, without recognizing that it's a profession like any other profession, which needs training and expertise. So I thought you were asking...
No. So, Rabbi, let me go back. So the first question is the mashgiach here. Second is vegetables. Give us one third question to ask.
Are we talking milchus or fleishik?
You tell me. You're talking 25,000 people here. We want to know.
Okay. A fleishik place, certainly you should ask if the mashgiach, and again, if part of that first question was if the mashgiach accept deliveries of places, because most distributors have various items that they will distribute, different hechsheirim, different types of products, Yisroel from America, processed, non-processed. As an example, there is a certain shlachtes in America which has they have actually three different product streams. One shechit of North America, one shechit of South America, another which is a different type of shechim of a certain chassidus that other people either will or won't be happy with. But again, only if there's someone there to receive delivery will that be clear and locked in.
You would ask the mashgiach, does he accept the deliveries personally?
Yes, absolutely. If he checks in the deliveries, it's a critically important part of the hashgacha job is to check in the products. And
so, Rabbi Auerbach, let me ask you another question. Now, let's talk factories. We bring into our house everything basically with a hechsher, right?
Yes.
How do I know if it's a good hechsher or not? I'm buying tuna fish. It has some hechsher on. How do I know? European, you're getting European hechsheirim. I have no idea. I'm not from Europe. Do I know if the hechsheirim in Europe are good? What do we do?
Well, first of all, as a flat fact, European hechsheirim work to a different standard than the American hechsheirim. The American kosher market is robust enough that first of all, companies come looking for hechsheirim. You don't have to go hat in hand to a hechsher and say to a company and say, "Oh, listen, our Jewish community needs something. Can you please cooperate with us? And we're not going to make any trouble for you." And European, I have no foribble on the European hechsherim and the European communities that aren't large enough to leverage their muscle into this. But certainly, American hechsherim, b'derech klal, you can assume even commercial hechsherim are much more robust, much stronger, certainly more at a higher level of expertise.
So do you eat European hechsherim?
Very, very few. Very few.
Can I ask you which American hechsherim, if you had to rate them, could you give us here is this is the A list, this is the B list. Could you give us as consumers some insight?
You mean you asked me to shoot myself in my foot? Is that what you're asking me?
You know what? I want to tell you something, Rabbi Auerbach. This is what I say.
Yeah.
I say that if you saw somebody drowning, right, you would throw them a life. You would throw them a life. Right? If you saw somebody doing if you saw somebody about to, by accident, put in something, a cheeseburger, you would say, "Excuse me." There's a din of Leisamed al Damar Yecha. There's a din of Lifta Eva Leisit and Michel. You could be matzel so many people by pointing out, here are the better ones, here are the ones you should be focusing on.
Okay, so I'm going to
this program will have a minimum of 25,000 people who will listen to it. When do you have the opportunity to be mizaka 25,000 people, which means if they have families, it could be 50 or 100,000 people who they're feeding, to say, this is what you should be putting in your children's mouth. There's a famous story that they say over, somebody came to Kivega, he said he had a son, he was mamish so bright, his son, Tyra's nishtrain gang a in cup. So Kivega asked, and he found out one time he ate someplace and he wasn't medagdik, and it was metamtam aleva moyach, and he gave a little tshuva to be masakin it. You could do that 25,000 or 100 times over. Give us some advice, some practical, real hands advice.
Okay, so I'm going to do this in a roundabout way, because first we're going to from the Lavat Ishmayahen. Nobody goes to China to produce kosher food so that they can get a better kosher quality and save the consumer money. People go to manufacture there because they're looking for the cheapest thing that they have, and they can charge the same high price, and they compromise the quality of the product, the health of the consumer, and the quality of the kashrus. Because in China, you have to assume, and I get 4 or 5 different trade journals in my inbox every day, and the consistent thing across all industries is that China is a quicksand trap waiting for the disaster to befall somebody. So the first thing I would say, that if you want to make one Kabbalah that will certainly immediately have a positive effect on your kashrus, do not allow anything into your house from China. I don't care whose ashgacha it is.
Wait, so let me just ask. My job, I get paid here to push back.
Good.
We had on a very credible thing. He said, we produce in China. I said, how do you deal with the kashrus? He says, we only produce in China things that kashrus is not really an issue. Like they'll produce. I said, what? I didn't push back well. He said, we do waters in China. And it was things that are not really. It's a very derivative that would be a kashrus issue. Right? Would you agree with that or not?
Well, it is certainly in China. It's impossible to know what they're going to do wrong. For instance, in America, it's reasonable to project. Let's say you have a canned good. And we're not going to start talking about all the shilos of bishlach, what is or is not. But let's say a cannery where you have a retort cannery. In America, you're not going to find in the same retort, in the same kalim, kosher vegetables and pork. In China, you don't know what you're going to find. If you have a responsibility, there is no way for a person to be able to anticipate the twists and turns of what takes place in the Chinese market.
Yeah, they eat rabbit. They eat snakes over there. You may find out that
they poison children in order to bring the assay up of protein in their formula. They put poison. Remember the melamine thing? There were 60,000 children that died, and they would not even let the WHO in to try to investigate where it was. They don't care.
Right. Okay. So one easy one. If it's coming from China, the hechsher is probably dubious. Next, what else?
That's first of all. Now I'll tell you a story. This was told to me by a friend of mine. This is only cliche. I did not hear it firsthand. Somebody whom I trust, you don't have to, I trust, told me the following story. That when Rabbi was still alive, the Edo, he had sent a mishgiach to America to do a production here. And somehow or another, the mishgiach was stuck here. He had to be, and he ran out of food. So he called Rabbi Blau in a panic and said, "What do I do? I'm in the middle of, Wyoming, and we're making a production. I would have food." So he said, "Go to the supermarket, and if something has an OU on it, you know that this was dealt with by professionals. It's not a hefgewalt. It's not some guy sitting in his office somewhere counting his money saying, this is probably kosher. It's not a problem. A commercial hechsher." Now, the reason I'm saying OU is because this is what the story was. I'm saying the story the way it was. If you have a commercial hechsher that is recognized universally as a professional organization, that is manned by professional, not only mashgichim, but people with administrative know-how and the scientific understanding to be able to know how products are manufactured, and the hachna and the relationships with Talmidei Chachamim and Paiskim to be able to present shilas and then take the tshuvas that they get and apply them to the knowledge that they have, that is always more secure than somebody who's patching around. And as people have told me, these hechsheirim told me, of course I opened up a hechsher. I need money for my kail. Of course I opened up a hechsher.
So who are the institutional hechsheirim? Who are they?
The KSA. The OU. I have a lot of respect for the OU. They more than any other hechsher, they staff up to deal with the crunch and the crush of business that they have.
Right. Okay.
In Eretz Yisrael.
Wait. Go in America. You said you worked for the Chaf K.
Yes, I did.
Is that an institutional hechsher?
It is an institutional hechsher, and they do their job well.
Okay, go through the American ones, because most of our listeners, we get some Israel. We're going to do a special show on Eretz Yisrael, by the way.
Okay.
Who in America? What are the bigger institutional hechsheirim? You say they're staffed, they're prepared, they have the manpower, they do the diligence, they spend the money, etc.
And by the way, the OU and the KSA, I have spoken frequently in public about the public's responsibility to approach hechsheirim, and universally, the one that I get back feedback from people saying that, they actually called me back, they actually answered my questions, was the OU. If you're going to go to agencies and you can't find anybody to answer your question, and you can't get an answer once you leave the question, then that's a reason not to be suspicious of how well they're doing their job.
Because they're not manned, they're on demand, it's just become a profit center,
exactly.
And returning phone calls costs money.
Exactly so.
Okay, who else are the institutional hechsheirim?
I think that I'm not going to start going through one by one.
What about the CRC? Would you say they're institutional?
The CRC in Chicago?
Yeah.
The CRC in Chicago is a very high-level hechsher. They are staffed by B'nai Torah. They are very public-minded. They're very concerned for the well-being of the kosher consumer. They go above and beyond the call in making sure that they supply the kosher consumer with information that will be helpful to them.
So which of the Hamish hechsheirim do you like?
The Nir Batarov is a person whom I've met with many, many times, spoken to many, many times. He is a professional. He once joked with me that there must have been some yeki somewhere up in the family, in the yichus, that snuck into the family, because he has a teva of yakishkeit with his office. I've been to his office, and what I do or try to do with the Hamish hechsheirim is I would go to their office, and they take a specific guys go into other companies. None of these people manufacture their own product. They go into other places. And I say, let's take this, and I'll prepare it. I say, here is the product, here is the production date of this product. Show me your file. I want to know who was there. One person actually told me, no, the mishgiach, we don't have any of the receipts. I said, really? It cost about $6,000 or $8,000 to make this production, and you don't want to claim that on your taxes for your expenses? No. And the mishgiach just called you up and said, listen, I spent $6,000. Please send it to me. You sent it. You don't have receipts. No, and you can't show me the receipt for the airline ticket. He didn't walk to Wyoming. No. Okay, so somebody who doesn't have those records is because the records don't exist. But I've gone near about him many times, and he's been able to randomly pull out files for each and every product, every production. People
now,
like
if a consumer like me called up the Nir Bartha and I said, I see you giving a hechsher on ABC, would you share with me the mashgiach's history of a tenant? Would they share it to a regular consumer or no?
That's a very good question. And I know that I've sent people to call the Nir Bartha, and they've come back satisfied. On the other hand, sometimes people have told me that he didn't call me back or whatever. And he's an extremely busy person. He has a huge plate full of stuff. He does Ali Meal Mart, which is and again, he does mishpacha, and these are serious concerns and serious complicated things, and he's on top of it. So it could be that he doesn't have. He does began.
So can I ask you a question, an unfair question? That's what people pay me for. If you had to choose, you could eat Nirabart or OU. Which do you take?
I would probably take the Nirabart.
And because of why?
Because the Nirabart, to my specific and personal knowledge, will turn down hechsheirim if he doesn't feel that it would be to the best interest of the kosher consumer. I know that because I brought him stuff, and he said, no, I don't want to get involved in that. And the OU, and any hechsher, the KSA has the same thing, that when a company comes to us, it is our responsibility, the way we hold up our end of the rope with the kosher consumer is by taking a viable hechsher and doing it excellently.
They feel they have a communal responsibility to give a hechsher.
Yeah. That's what commercial hechsheirim should exist for the purpose of bettering the state of Kashrus in America or the world.
Okay. Are there hechsheirim that you won't eat?
Yeah.
Could you tell us some that you say as a consumer, I would not eat this hechsher? You say, I want to be matzal you and your family, you have a son, you want him to shteigeis, to be an Adam Gadol. I would be very concerned if you're eating this hechsher. Not because it's not kosher, but because...
Okay, I would be very concerned eating anything coming out of China, and I would be very concerned of hechsheirim that are comprised of one single person that find themselves in South America and in Spain and in China and in England and in Belgium and in Eretz Yisroel, and they're involved in shchita and in baking and in Chol Yisroel and in cheese and all sorts of things. And where you're dealing there with one or two people, then those are people I'd be very, very worried about.
So we basically, in other words, is it fair to say the larger the organization, the more likely that it's going to be good?
Yes.
Okay. In general...
Now, by the way,
yeah.
you have to temper that with the recognition that the larger it is, the more possible it is that they're going to come across errors too. Because there is, in any organization, everybody wants to only hire the best possible people. But, you're tossed to die. Some people are better than others. Some people, after they're working, you scratch your head and say, my goodness, how'd they slip through?
Right. And, do you find that the not-for-profits are better because they're less concerned about the bottom line and more concerned about the kashrus?
That's hard. That's hard to say because there are many different there are many different concerns that agencies have. For instance, you take something like there are certain agencies who will do the equivalency of what's called pro bono work, where they will try to do something as a chesed, and this is a dark web and edge of the spectrum. I can't get real specific about, but it is reasonable to say that at the end of the day, for instance, someone that works for an agency, I work for the KSA. At the end of the day, if we terminate a company for cause or even for concern, it will not affect me personally. So I'm free to do that. If you have a hechsheirim, if he terminates somebody, I know a specific person in Flatbush, for instance, who gives many hechsheirim, and somebody at a food service place that he had told me that when he came to the hechsheirim, okay, if the guy says, "Do I need a mashgiach?" He says, "Yeah, you need a mashgiach. Go find somebody and pay him, and that's fine."
But how do we? So Rabbi Auerbach, I'm coming across this issue. It's called, in the police world, it's called the blue wall.
Right.
Nobody that we've spoken to is willing to say, here are the better actors. Well, you said some of the better actors, but here are the bad actors.
I believe you're right. And if a group of, for instance, I have certain serious issues, let's say, with the way certain grape juices are manufactured in the United States. I am not going to take time to, or even opportunity to tell a civilian the details of this. I have addressed companies of Rabbanim when Rabbanim say, "Listen, we heard you make an announcement that this is not acceptable, this isn't good. What would you like?" And I was extremely candid. And I believe that these Rabbanim, I met with them because these Rabbanim have then a responsibility to go back, and they can decide how and in exact what proportion they're going to educate their particular kehillah. I think that is much more reasonable than making announcements on podcasts to 25,000 people. I think that Rabbanim, if people who hear this podcast say, "I'm concerned, I'm going to go to my Rav," and the Rav will come and there will be serious, mature inquests made, that is the forum in which real information should be shared and should be acted on.
But Rabbi Auerbach, Rabbanim are very busy. Rabbanim also, for the most part, are fearful of what people will say to them, and I'm not so fearful. I mean, I honestly think that's kicking the can.
Okay. I understand that you think so, and I understand that.
And what's my proof of the?
No, I think that you want to splash you want to splash on your podcast, Reb David, and I agree with you. And I agree with you to the point where I would urge people to get their rabbanim to convene meetings to discuss this seriously and maturely. But I don't think that tossing this out into the public domain is the way to do it.
Can I ask you, if it was a doctor who was performing poorly, would you feel comfortable doing it?
Where it's universally poorly, where it's
there's a hospital. I go online. I say, Maimonides Hospital is a place. It's a sakana to go into. I know people who went into for minor procedures, never walked out of there alive. Yep. It has a terrible record. Yeah, I'll say it on the air. Maimonides wants to sue me. They have my address. I'm not afraid to say that. If I knew the same thing about a particular Kashrus organization, I would say, you're putting your neshama on the line by eating from them. What's the shlach?
Okay. So I will respond in the following fashion. And I just had this discussion yesterday with the Rav here in Lakewood. There are two different types of people who are Kashrus consumers. There are people who are looking to skim along, and they just barely keep to this side of the edge of what's acceptable. And you can't twist somebody's arm and say, that's silly, don't do that. And then there are people who will bother making the inquiries. And because there are certain things, for instance, in NPGS that we will have on our shelves, that if somebody calls me and say, should I eat this? I'll say, no, I really don't recommend that you eat that. And they'll say, so why do you have it on the shelf? And I tell them, because there is a certain line below which we will not accept product. On the other hand, if somebody bothers making the effort of calling me, what they're communicating to me is I don't want to know if this is minimally acceptable. I want to know above and beyond. Is this for somebody that's above and beyond? So make the effort. If you make the effort, then you deserve a different answer. If you don't make the effort, then you're Amcha. And Amcha people, this is good enough for Amcha people. People have made their choice on their own.
Rabbi, are there hechsheirim that you would say fall below the line?
There are some, yes. There certainly are. Anything with a triangle K, I would not under any circumstance take in my home. Unless it's something like water that doesn't require hechsher.
Give us a few more hechsheirim that you say, this is below the line. If you're a Erlich Yid, you should not have this in your house.
I don't believe the KF on something which requires a hechsher is something that belongs in a Ben Terry's house.
I'm sorry, the KF?
Yes.
Okay.
That's on Red Bull, by the way, so if you're waiting for the blowback, here it comes.
Okay. What else? Give us a few more. But to you, these are dvarim pshutim. Most people have no idea of this. Red Bull, you know?
There's a place, his name is Steinberg, he has a very cute, because in order to not be sued, he made himself a logo with a coffee cup on its side with a K in the opening of the cup, and he calls himself the Cup K, so that he can piggyback on the public recognition of the Chezky, and he does a lot of vegetarian and these type of restaurants in New York. He does a lot more else. He does fleishke places too, and it's absolutely not something I would recommend under any circumstance. I would certainly recommend against it.
Okay. Could you give us, Rabbi Auerbach, the 5 golden stars or the 6? These are the best. This is the class that all hechsheirim have to aspire to be.
I believe that now 5. How about 4.5? Because 5 means they never make any mistakes.
Everybody makes mistakes. It could be 4.5. My point, I think everybody makes mistakes. We're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about somebody who has overall a quality of excellence. And Babe Ruth struck out many, many times, right?
Yep.
But who is the quality of excellence? If all hechsheirim were like this, well, good given, what would they be?
I would have to say it'll be Nerabarta.
Nerabarta, okay.
There's a lot of moving pieces in this particular puzzle, because in certain aspects others are better, some better than others. Shia Katz is very careful. He has very few hechsheirim. I think he's called the Magrava. He's very careful.
Okay.
And very very timid, but I don't mean in a negative sense. He's not aggressive and bold.
Okay. I understand. Who else?
Can I say the KSA?
No, that's the gay Avadavar, so we can't really.
Okay.
But that could be the half. How's that? You have, like I said, Rabbi Yankov Blau said that if you take something with an OU, you know that it was dealt with by professionals. That's not to say that they don't have their shortcomings, but you know that it's a group of professionals who have pride in what they do, mostly, and they would not put something out knowingly. What do you think of the European hechsheirim? You say you would not take into your house. What do you think of? How do the American hechsheirim compare to the Israeli hechsheirim? OU versus Badat.
Well, there is no question that the 3 upper echelon, the Badat, Rabbi Landau, and Rabbi Rubin, are certainly above what you're going to find in the United States with anybody, period.
Even though Rabbi Elefant from the OU disagrees with you, you know that. He says he thinks that the OU is better than Badat, it's better than Landau, better than Rubin.
Okay. That's one of the great things about living in America. Everybody has their own opinion.
Okay, in closing, is there any question I should have asked you that I didn't?
You've been pretty direct, and you should have asked, why do people demand every single possible, or better yet, if you would have asked me, what is the single most cancerous part of the Jewish milieu that's endangering Kashrus, I would say it's this insatiable demand that kosher consumers have that anything and everything must be kosher. Because what it turns into is that the Balabatim, the Seichrim, go to their hechsher and say, this to be made kosher. And if you won't, I'll find somebody else. And there was a story, I got sidetracked earlier about the story I was telling you, that there was a vegetable company, a frozen vegetable company in China, which had a hechsher originally, and then it changed. And it turns out because the original guy wanted much, much, much more mashgiach presence, and the Baal Bus found somebody later who would give him a third of that presence.
Who was that party? Which party required only a third?
The frozen vegetables that has a different hechsher now.
Which one is it?
You live near a kosher supermarket?
There's hundreds of frozen. I mean, there's dozens frozen vegetables.
Actually, there aren't. Actually, there are only a few frozen vegetables coming from China.
So it's frozen vegetables coming from China. You say the old hechsher didn't want to do it, and the new one does.
Well, the old hechsher wanted to do it under very strict guidelines,
and
where they had mashgichim and they had 3 shifts of mashgichim, and the new hashgacha was able to find a way to do it with 1/3 of that. And so the Baal Bus said, "Listen, as long as I have the Yiddish ices to print on my packaging, it's going to sell. So why do I have to go spend 3 times the money?"
And which shchita, Rabbi Auerbach, do you say? Would it be the same hechsheirim for shchita the way in the same lineup you gave us?
No.
Okay, give us on shchita.
Well, the absolute top of the line shchita in America, I personally believe, is the NPGS. We have our own shchita, and the raya is that during the craziest time of the year, when people are suddenly getting 50% glut instead of 30% glut, we actually, for 3 consecutive weeks, our shchita ended up with the paucity of we came back with half of what we normally do because it depended.
But it's not. I'm talking on nationally available shchita. What would you say?
Available. I would say that Solomon's, the Nearbutter does a good job, a good solid job. Solomon's is better than that.
Okay.
And again, you're looking at what is commonly available.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 that I would toss out there. Anything else you'd have to look at carefully before you. South America is a problem, so you're going to want to stick to North American beef because the beef are healthier, and the Schlachtheiser. The greatest thing that keeps people honest is somebody looking over their shoulder, and the Schlachtheiser here in North America are Rosh Hashanah, and people know that if they try to cut corners, everybody's going to know about it by next week. So that's great. So North American beef, Solomon's, this Skvera Hashgach, by the way, does an excellent job. Skvera is, generally speaking, on top of their game. The reason I neglect to bring it up is because they have it on very few items. They're not aggressive whatsoever in pushing their items. They have no.
No, you spoke very highly. You said over from Rabbi and OU. What do you think of the OU shchita?
That's a good question. I have no personal knowledge of the OU shchita at the present time.
Rabbi Auerbach, it's been an honor to have you on with us. If I'm ever in Lakewood, I'm going to for sure stop by NPGS and buy their shchita.
And you could stop by and face to face. I will tell you any information that if somebody bothers making the trek to find out what is better, I'm always happy to help them directly. But as I said, I don't think that this, I couldn't say more than they did on this particular forum. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us from Eretz Yisroel, Rabbi Halberstam. He's been in Kashrus for 16 years. He's a Talmud of Bobov, of our Yisroel, learned to B'nai Brak by Chazar Nachum. He runs SKS, which is a Kashrus organization both in America and in Eretz Yisroel. Welcome, Rav Halberstam.
Salam Aleichem.
So, Rav Halberstam, we've been speaking.
I would just like to add, we also have an office in China.
Okay.
And we are the largest hechsher in China. We have local Chinese people working for us. The Rabbi has been to over 1,500 different factories in mainland China. When you come to think of a hechsher in China, you think of Shat, which is SKS.
Okay.
And if you understand the way the people, Chinese mentality and the way the system of how China works is we are number one.
Okay. So let me start by asking you, we've had on the OU, we've had on the Chezky, we've had on many other hechsheirim. We really haven't spoken to any Chassidisher hechsheirim. Could you tell us, Babava or Yisroel, etc., what is this? How would you rate the Chassidisher hechsheirim in America?
Usually there's, when it comes to parents talking about children, there's the cloud, a father cannot be a aid for a son. I was once asked, who are the mashgichim of the hechsheirim? Basically, we are one another's mashgich. Every hechsher is a mashgichim from one another. We are today in a real modern world where everything is, the technology, everything is online right away with all of the modern technology. So there are no secrets. Basically, all policies from most hechsheirim are all the same. It's the difference is just as in the strictness of certain guidelines, which is more halachaically than it's Chassidic, and it depends on what kind of community the hechsher is trying to cater to. If it's a hechsher that's catering to a certain kehillah, to a certain establishment, then they are much stricter because they usually follow the guidelines of that certain kehillah above the Kashrus laws and above the basic Kashrus standards. But if we are talking about a general hechsher for general products or caterers, which also has to do with in which community the caterer or the restaurant happens to be, then they follow the guidelines of for what type of people eat from these certain products. But if the product is a main product like this wine or certain bakery goods, which is produced by a Hamish or a local company or a local food establishment, and it's really the people who eat it are from the general population, then they are basically all the same.
So let's talk about the ones that are not for a general population, but a Chassidisher hechsher that's trying to focus on a more exclusive clientele, right? Do they use ingredients, let's say from the OU or the Chezky or the Star K, etc.? Do they use the same, flavorings, etc., that come from the OU?
When it comes to this specific question, can be answered in a few different ways. I'll try to answer to the best of the way that I can that can be understood. Our hechsher, generally in China, we give on what's called the main ingredients, and then there are the supplements, or it's as you mentioned, the flavorings, or it's the preservatives, which one hechsher usually has to use another hechsher. When it comes to the question of asking if we use the products of large Kashrus establishments that you mentioned earlier, if we are dealing here with issues which would be a difference to the Chassidisher community, if it has to do, let's say, here in Eretz Yisrael and dairy products, if it has to do with Shabbos, or it has to do if it's relied on if it's Chalav Yisrael or Halberstam, like SKS does not give on Halberstam a hechsher under no product, which means to say if a company has some Chalav Yisrael, some Chalav Akum, or what's generally called Halberstam, we do not touch it.
Okay, but outside of Halberstam, does SKS have to use OU ingredients for its hechsheirim?
In generally not. Mostly not, because today we are mainly...
Do you sometimes use OU ingredients in your hechsheirim?
If we can give the hechsher on that product as well.
So how does that mean? That means
like
if you use oil, let's say, or a flavoring from OU, do you then go back to the same factory that the OU did and do your own? So then what do you need OU for?
to know, because there's two things. There's something that's called that you give the actual hechsher, and then there's something that's called that you check the actual ingredient. If it's an ingredient that can be used, which is, it depends how the thing was manufactured and how the thing was produced, and it's generally the Rav checks the list and he sees that everything is on the guidelines and it's used on the things that's acceptable for our hechsher, then we use it.
Even though
if it's something.
So wait. So do you go there or do you use it without going there?
Usually we go down to every factory for every product.
So if you have a product that has 30 different products it has from 25 different places in the United States, all OU. You go to check all 25 different factories before you give the hechsher on that?
We check out, yes, but then we don't have to go recheck for every production, which means we establish that this certain product, this certain ingredient can be used, and then we use it.
So you don't go back for afterwards. You go once. So are you saimach for the OU on the OU's Kashrus after that?
We are saimach on our evaluation of this product.
Right, but you're not there when this is being produced, right? So are you saimach on the OU's product at that point?
If it's a product that needs a general hechsher, there are certain products. No, there are certain products. One of the questions that I was looking at was how often do you check companies? How often do you go down? When is the nichnas v'yoytze? Right. So it depends on each product what is being made. There are certain products that it's a certain guideline, it's the factory, the way the factory produces it from the beginning, all the steps till it's packaged and sent, and which sometimes every production, sometimes you need to be there 24 hours.
Rabbi Hamachshir, how many mashgichim do you have in China? How big is your organization?
We have over 10 mashgichim at all times.
In China?
The Rabbi himself, yes, that's besides our office of the 10 locals that are our liaisons and our interpreters.
I understand. So you have 10 Hamachshir people. And how many products do you give a hechsher on in China?
Many. It's hard to say the exact number, but 100.
How many?
I would say a couple of hundred ingredients.
200, 300. Which
a couple of
500.
Yeah.
Berach, how many?
We have over 1,000 factories.
1,000 in China.
In China, that the Rabbi goes to. The Rabbi is
now, let me ask you a question.
In China.
Let me ask you a question. You have 1,000 factories. Now, for something to be nichnas v'yoytze, how often do you have to be nichnas?
It depends per product and how the product is being produced.
Give me an example.
Sometimes.
Give me an example. Give me some of the products that you give a hechsheirim on.
So as I said, we basically do the preservatives and the flavors and the ingredients.
Preservatives, flavors. Do you do vegetables or anything?
Flavors. Dried fruits and vegetables, or either there are two ways in doing dried fruits and vegetables. There's
you do coffee and but these are mostly processed.
Coffee and cocoa.
So you do processed goods. So let me ask you a question. If I have a factory, it does preservatives. How often do you come down to the factory?
Usually when the production is being done for the hechsher.
Which is how often?
Depends. Sometimes there's a larger production, which could be 2-3 days. Sometimes it's 1 day.
And are you there the entire time?
The entire working day, yes.
Okay. And flavors, same thing? You're there the entire day?
Yes.
And dried fruits and vegetables the entire day?
Mostly yes, but sometimes if it's a longer production is when we check out the factory, the way it's being produced. After all the inventory comes into the factory and the mashgiach has checked it out, Then we are there basically a few times during the day, and we do the follow-ups by the packaging and the product.
And in how many cities, Rabbi Halberstam, how many cities in China are you in?
Most factories are in like 10, 15 different areas and provinces. I could say there are like 30, 40 different cities. But they're basically in different provinces.
So could I ask you a question? Do you find the Chinese, like, are they usually very clean like Americans and use simple ingredients, or are the Chinese a little, more third world like? I mean, they use snake, they're supposed to eat everything in China. What are the Chinese like?
Look, when you're talking about China in general, it's a huge country. There are over 1 billion people. But when it comes today in the factories, since most of the world, everybody looks to cut edges in cost, China is one of the largest economies today, and especially in producing and in manufacturing. They are today, not only are they up to date in certain areas, they are even more advanced than the rest of the world.
But do people go to China because they want better quality or because they want to cut costs?
It's hard to answer the question of quality, but of cost, it's cheaper today to manufacture in China.
So I have a question. You give mashgichim for 1,000 factories in 30 to 40 cities in a country that cuts costs, right? And you're the largest hechsheirim in China. How do 10 mashgichim oversee 1,000 factories in 30 to 40 different cities and provinces and there all the time? How is that even possible?
So first of all, it doesn't mean that we give the hechsher at every time in 1,000 factories. It means to say that we have given hechsheirim in over 1,000 factories, and the Rabbi has inspected over a few thousand factories. A mashgiach can be every day in a different factory, and in a 2-week span, he can be in 10 to 15 different factories. Sometimes he could be in 2 factories in a day, because it depends on the production.
But if he's there the entire time of the production, and the production takes 2 days, he can't be more than 2 or 3 factories a week if he's doing 2-day production. And he also has to travel. Not
every day, and not every visit to a factory is a production. Sometimes it's a spot check. Sometimes it's just a follow-up. Usually, mainly, it's a one day, and sometimes you can even push in 2 a day if it's in the same area. If it's in different areas, if you want to talk to me how does the day of a mashgiach in China look, that's a whole discussion for itself. It starts off at 4 in the morning. He has to travel to the airport. He has to fly out for the 1 or 2 hours till he gets to the city where he's going to be supervising the factory, and then he has to have a local driver drive him out to the factory, which can be another 2 hours. He gets to the factory like at 10 in the morning or even 11, and he's there till 5, 6 in the afternoon. Then he has to travel back by car to the airport, and then he has to fly to the main city, which is in that province. So let's say if it's in Shanghai or if it's in Beijing, and then he has to get to his hotel. And if there's any delay in the flight, sometimes a mashgiach can get back to the hotel at 11 or even 12. At 4, he's back on his feet again,
so you're
going through the same process.
4 hours a night they sleep.
I didn't say every night. Most nights they get 6, 7 hours, but it can be that there happens to be, if there's a delay or any technical issue, that the mashgiach, we would say it's Mesiris Nefesh for the 2 weeks that a mashgiach is in China. It's Mesiris Nefesh, Berachnias and Begashmias.
And how many times a year do they go to mashgiach? How many times a year do they go to mashgiachim?
So, as I said, the Rebbe himself is 2 weeks a month in China. And every mashgiach is, it depends, everybody has their families, but a a regular mashgiach can do 5 or 6 trips a year, which means every other month he can go for 2 weeks. So basically in the kasher we have like we have 30.
Do you hire? You have 30 mashgichim.
We have between 30 and 40 mashgichim.
Okay. What do you think of the hechsheirim in America? Do you know them? I mean, have you been involved or no?
We started off with that question, and the same way I like people should tell me, should evaluate me, should comment about my hechsher. It's very hard to give such an assessment. And generally, every Yid has a Chezky Kashrus. We believe that if somebody is a Yireh Shamayim and he takes on to give a hechsher, that then he's a known posek or a chashuv, then it's a good hechsher. In general speaking, it's Yisroel hechsheirim. But if we're talking about specific hechsheirim, it's very hard to say because it's like it happens to be. It's like a competition. One competitor talking about the other competitor. I can only talk about our miles.
Okay. Do you think that there are
rather than talking about negative about other hechsheirim?
Do you think there are any bad hechsheirim?
There are some hechsheirim which, unfortunately, do not keep up to certain standards, and which they are smaller hechsheirim. And then there are some larger hechsheirim which are known to use different guidelines of their poskim because they know to what type of community or for what type of general population they serve to, which leads them to use different halachaic guidelines which a general person wouldn't necessarily use. In the beginning of the conversation, we spoke about, so for a Chassidisher Yid, as we began, a Chassidisher Yid does not eat all of these large kashrus organizations, which there's not a name. Let's separate it as two kinds of hechsher. There's a hechsher that's a symbol, which you see if it happens to be a nice symbol with a letter K, which means that it's kosher, or a chaf, which is for kosher. And then there are hechsherim that which has the name of the actual Hamachshir or the name of the kehillah that he represents. A Chassidisher Yid would usually use a hechsher from his community or from other Chassidisher communities if it's a symbol of that community, or he would rely on a hechsher that's given by a certain Rav that he happens to know, rather than use a general hechsher where you see the symbol and you don't actually know who is behind that hashgacha. You might know who the Rav Hamachshir is, who their posek is, but you don't know the whole entire system behind that hechsher.
Let me ask you a question. Is hechsheirim complicated? Like, do you have to know chemistry? Do you have to know... How easy is it to be a mashgiach?
Okay. To be a mashgiach, there's a wide... there's a lot of misconcept and misunderstanding of what is a mashgiach's job and what the Rav Hamachshir's job is. A policeman has to know the laws, and he has to follow the laws, and he has to upkeep the laws. But it's not his job to be the interpreter of the law. That is the judiciary system.
Right.
A mashgiach has to know to follow orders and guidelines and check off the list of all of the requirements that his Rav Hamachshir gives him, that his Rav gives him, and he has to follow those steps to the last detail, and he has to keep up what he's told to do. It's not a mashgiach's job to be the posek. Any question that he calls his Rav Hamachshir. I mean, when I say he, I mean these are our guidelines. The Rav is available 24 hours.
Do you have like chemists on staff?
We have a chemist who is a general chemist who works in our Israeli office.
And what about in China? Do you have a chemist in China?
There we do. We have a local chemist who we use when we need him. But today, in the last 10, 15 years, but I would say I would add it on, even in the last couple of years, when most knowledge is more today with the technology, most information is out there. Somebody who has a small background or knows or learned a little bit, he doesn't have to be a full licensed, or however they call it, a graduate of chemistry school. Basically, today everything is common knowledge, but still, we know that all big hechsheirim have today chemists on staff.
So wait, you have to know like a lot about sodium benzoate. Are there shilas that could be in benzoic acid?
These questions is basically, there are a few
potassium bromate, sodium caseinate. These are in all foods. Like, do you know the makeups of these things?
I personally do not deal exactly with what the ingredients are in these ingredients.
You have BHA, butylated hydroxyzole, right? Canthaxazin, in almost all foods. What do you do when you come across canthaxazin?
Every product which is being produced beforehand, the Rav goes through the list.
The Rav is an expert in. There are 22 ways to make maltodextrin. The Rav knows all of them?
The Rav knows most of them, and if not, then the staff and the Mashgichim in the office, there is a chemist and there is a Rav, a posek, who is very well versed. He happens to be a doctor, a professor in an Israeli university, who he is the chemist.
You have a chemist in Eretz Yisroel who oversees 1,000 factories in China.
He doesn't oversee 1,000 factories. He oversees the products that are given to him to evaluate and to check. And when he gives the okay on how exactly this certain product or this certain ingredient is made, and the Mashgiach is given the guidelines of exactly what he Mashgiach, there are a lot of things is what you see. Let's take a certain issue. In China, sometimes they are very short-minded, and when they label something wine means by them alcohol. A Mashgiach that doesn't know China or doesn't know what he's looking for, he comes in right away, we're dealing here with yayin nesech, with wine. When usually it's nothing more than regular spirits, than regular alcohol.
My question to you is, you're saying that the small hechsheirim from a Rav are good. What does your average Rav know about ammonium sulfate, which is just about in every baked goods, right? Or azodicarbonamide, ADA. These big hechsheirim have hundreds of people on staff, right? And when something like this comes along, like butylated hydroxyzole, right? They know what to do. What does a Rav with his 5 mashgichim know about, the 12 different types of calcium sulfate?
So if I can tell you what other hashgachas do is usually they rely on the larger establishments. I can tell you what we do. We take every product.
Yeah.
We take every product, it goes through our lab, goes through our staff, our main office. We check every ingredient, and if we need to go down...
How do you know, you say you check every ingredient, how do you know if your urethane, your ethyl carbamate was done properly or not, the kalim that it was done with? How do you know?
Generally, which this is also an halachaic concept, is the way that today in Befrat, let's take the United States, which many of the larger hechsheirim and let's say I don't want to say it's the Litvish or the modern Orthodox or the other kinds, there's the certain thing that's called the fear of the government or the fear of the law, which basically when the company gives over the ingredients and the way a thing is produced, there is a certain ne'emanus. But again,
so you rely on the company. When the company sells polychlorinated biphenyl, yeah.
So since we are dealing here with China, which China needs an extra zehira, because Chinese, their whole mentality is the cutting of the corners. But the cutting of the corners is usually has to do, it's not that they're trying to cheat you to put something in different than what he discussed with you or what was made up. And that has to be part of the mashgiach's awareness, what he's looking for and what he's supposed to be looking for. But before, when the way a company or a factory gets a hechsher is that the Rebbe goes personally down. He meets the balabatim. He meets the owner or he meets the manager. We get the exact list. The Rebbe gets the feel and the layout of the factory.
But what does the Rebbe do when they give him and they say, yes, we're using in each run of the baking goods, we're using 2 gallons of perfluoroctanic acid. What does the Rebbe do?
So he checks it.
How does he check it? Perfluoroctanic acid is produced in Iowa. The Rebbe goes to Iowa?
He doesn't go down to Iowa. He gets a sample sent to him in a locked box.
What does the sample tell you? Good, but what does the sample tell you?
And then he gives it to the lab to check it out. What is it made out of?
But the lab can't tell you if it was made on treifa kalim, on kosher kalim. Can't tell you if you could do things by lab. You don't need hechsheirim b'chlal. Just take everything, put it in a lab, and you say whether you could eat it or not.
Generally, in a factory that
maybe it was made on Shabbos. Maybe it was made on Shabbos. There's 100 different problems that could be that a lab won't tell you.
Again, when you get to a factory that produces A usually does not produce B. There's the general kashrus of every establishment, of every factory.
Yeah, but you said they produce flavor.
Earlier,
every flavor is produced with compounds. So you're dealing with complex productions. These are preservatives. Preservatives should have different ingredients. Today in China, so first of all, if we take China doesn't rely on outside work or on outside product. In China, everything comes from China. Okay.
So
give me an example.
It's not a question that you have a certain chemical that's in China that's being imported from the United States, and that's what they use. They rely everything on local. Local means Chinese local. And every single, again, I will repeat it again, every single product, every single ingredient is checked beforehand by the Rebbe, the factory, and later the mashgiachim do the follow-up. Every single ingredient is broken down in our labs. Our chemists, our advisors go through every single ingredient, and then it's established if this is an okay ingredient.
Yeah.
And as we discussed earlier also, yes, sometimes we rely on the other bigger hechsheirim who give on this certain product a hechsher, but of course we rely on ourselves because we go down and we recheck the way of the production and how this certain thing is being done.
How many compounds are in your typical flavor? How many ingredients go into a flavor?
It's a very hard question. Sometimes it could be tens. Sometimes it could be a few.
So if it's tens, a guy says, give me a hechsher on this cherry flavor. So you don't go down to they give you, so there's 30 ingredients. You go down then to the other 30 places to check them out before you give the hechsher on the cherry flavor?
These were done already. These were done in the previous years, and then it only needs to be done a follow-up. So once you establish somebody uses a cherry flavor, we check out the cherry flavor, and now it's gone.
But maybe they changed the way they do. Maybe the factory that made the cherry flavor is using different ingredients in it. Ways to make cherry flavor. Maybe they started using it.
That's why
with different alcohols. Maybe
that's why a Rav has to. That's why the Rav and the Rav Hamachshir has to keep himself updated with every factory, the way they produce it. If they change their ways of production.
Do you see, Rabbi Halberstam, why maybe the big organizations could possibly be much more thorough and more effective? Those who have thousands of mashgiachim or hundreds of mashgiachim as opposed to 10. Do you understand why if each flavor could have 30 different ingredients coming into it? Do you understand why maybe a big organization is better?
Theoretically, the way you are putting down these questions, it could be that you are correct. But if you're looking at the facts, the Metzias on the ground, the way the hashgakas work is there are certain ways that it's general. When somebody says something has water, it's water. You don't think that the guy put into it a shtickle or chazer or something else, or he put it. When we're dealing about flavors and we're going into the details of every single thing, is the bigger hechsher and the small hechsher are the exact same thing. Because when you would take China, the big Kashrus establishment don't have 500 mashgichim in China. They have 500 mashgichim in the worldwide. They don't have steady mashgichim there. They don't have an office in China. They also do an even less than what we actually do in China. And once again, when we're dealing with the product...
Rabbi Halberstam, do you know that many of the mashgichim we spoke to, said they practically won't eat anything that comes out of China because of all the problems they have in China?
Okay, now we're dealing about so first of all, it's a very interesting question, and I was waiting for it to come up. In every single component or almost everything what you use, including the telephones that we are talking on now, could be American technology, but they were produced in China. And that's why...
Excuse me, food is very...
One second. I didn't finish my answer.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to food, that's why most small hechsheirim, when you meet with them, like once or twice a year, the Rabbi travels to the United States and he meets with tens of other Kashrus, Vade Kashrus, or with their Rabbanim, to update, to get to know one another, to know their products, to know their standards. I've personally accompanied him on a few of such trips. Just recently, we were in the United States around, I think it was in Chezky, or like 2 months ago. And we visited over 30 different kashruses or vade kashrus, either the heads or their main mashgichim. And basically in the United States, when it comes to food, everybody hears the word China, we try not to go to China. But for general, if we're talking about restaurants or caterers that don't need to get to products that come from China. But if we're dealing with the rest of the world, and we're dealing with, also not in Eretz Yisrael, but we're dealing about the rest of the world, there are so many, if it's in cosmetics, or if it's in dietary, in vitamins, or in certain kinds of fishes that are produced at such a large quantity that it's hard to imagine, and the cost of a regular thing. Let's say take a hat that's produced in the United States, and costs $200 a hat that comes from China that could be the equally good in quality can cost $55, $100, or the seller wants to have a better name, so he sells it for a drop less than the regular price. And that's exactly why we emphasize that when it comes to China, we know the Chinese. We have an office in China with the locals.
I understand, but I'm just telling you that
we have 10 Chinese working for us. Yes, you are right. You are right.
Said they will not eat
many
anything that comes out
hechsheirim
of China. Will not eat anything that came out of China.
Most hechsheirim in the United States.
Yes.
If they can eliminate using
China,
the Chinese product, they will do so.
Now, cosmetics don't need a hechsher for the most part, right? Vitamins,
correctly.
Vitamins, for the most part, don't need a hechsher either, arguably. Well,
no, cosmetics has to do with Pesach. If certain ingredients are, or there are certain cosmetics, let's say like lipstick or things that can come in contact with the mouth, that can have certain ingredients to know if it's kosher or not. So it's not so easy to brush off and say that cosmetics don't need a
Well, lipstick, I could arguably, if they made a flavor. Rabbi Halberstam, in your office in Bnei Brak, how many employees do you have?
It's not in Bnei Brak, in Ashdod.
How many employees?
We have six to seven full-time employees.
And how many, are educated, went to college, have degrees, and are chemists, etc.?
those are the Rabbanim, and they are the ones who run the office. I would say that those are 5, and then there are the secretaries. But then there are the part-time workers. There are another 5, 6.
And which of those do the chemical analysis and stuff?
There is a chemist, as I told you earlier, who happens to be a professor from Yid, and he's full-time on staff.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Rabbi Halberstam.
It was a great pleasure, and may Hashem help us that no michshol should come out from under our hands.
Amen. Kolto, bye-bye.
The serious time is bye.
Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
Yeah, hi, David. Thank you for your show. On the question, the riddle of the week that he asked, Yitzhak Moshe al Hashem, how come Moshe spoke so loud in the Shiva, and it says in Shakanuch, and I'll say that Utalagbiya Koila B'Tzilusay. So I heard that Chaim Kanievsky was asked this question, and Chaim Kanievsky answered that the Uke is not the hechrich that it means that the person raises his voice. It's just a sort of a tefillah. It's one of the 10 Lashonim for tefillah that's mentioned in the Medrash Rabbah passage of Chanan. There are 10 Lashonim. One of them is tzedakah. It's a kind of a way of davening. It doesn't have to be that it means someone raising their voice. In the Raya, it says in Shmuel, "Vayilak al Hashem kol halaylo." How could a person scream a whole night? In the Hechsheirim, he says that the Oka is a kind of a tefillah, and it comes from Hamachshir Alev. But it doesn't have to mean that he raises his voice. I saw someone else quote that it says in Zohar and Shemot Atchos. It says in Zohar, "Gedoyle the Oka mekilan." The Oka hi balev. You see clearly that the Oka doesn't have to mean screaming with your voice. As I says, it means the Oka hi balev. Hadohoi diksev, toek libam el Hashem. Thank you for your show, and all the other shows are very, very interesting. Thank you.
Hi, Rabbi David. How are you? My name is Nachum Parnas. I'm calling regarding your absentee question about how Moshe was able to raise his voice in tefillah. I had a couple of thoughts. Firstly, it's possible that Sa'aka, it doesn't necessarily mean raising your voice. It could be just another lashon of tefillah. If you look in Unclus in that pasuk, he says V'tzali. Secondly, like you mentioned, it's only din in Shemona Esrei, and even if you go with Ari, that it's also in Pesukah de Zimra, or maybe it was Magen Avram, I forget who you said. That could be also, it's a part of formal tefillah, especially the Real Shitase. He says that you should not skip any of Pesukah de Zimra because it's necessary to bring the tefillah upstairs, that it should be mekabel. And my last thought is that I guess it's along the same lines. Is that a proof to that? There could be the formal tefillah, including Pesukah Zimra, is different than other kinds of tefillah. There's a Gemara in Shabbos Kof Yitasim Beis that says Kol Ha'inam Yishmar B'Chol Kaychai. If you look at the Rosh Hashanah, is they rip up, and Taisus over there brings a medrash that b'chol kaychai means, I think Rashi over there says b'chol kaychai means b'chol kavanasai. Taisus over there says b'chol kaychai means b'kol ram, and he brings a medrash to that effect, and it's mavatal gezerah ra, a gezerah kasha. So you see that there's the Shemona Esrei and there's formal tefillah on one side, and then there's Kol Ha'inam Yishmar B'Chol Kaychai, which is Mavatal Gzeira Kasha, and that Taisus brings from the Medrash is B'Kol Ram. So you see when being Mavatal Gzeira Kasha, you must spell B'Kol Ram. So when Moshe was going out, he was being Mavatal Gzeira Kasha of Sfardim, so he used to spell B'Kol Ram. Okay, Shkaya, take care.